Chapter 2918, New World, Grand Finale. Chapter 2918, New World, Grand Finale, Fire Dragon Empire, Million Forest City. Currently, over 50 million expert players had gathered in Million Forest City, the largest city in the south of the Fire Dragon Empire. Even the weakest among these players was a level 100+, Tier 3 player. The number of Tier 4 players gathered even exceeded 10,000. However, an indescribably solemn atmosphere shrouded Million Forest City, and everyone looked tense. This was because Million Forest City was the biggest barrier in the south. If the Outer World NPC army broke through here, it could march straight for Flame Dragon City. The executives of the various player forces had gathered on top of Million Forest City's front wall. Their faces were pallid as they quietly observed the Outer World NPC army hidden in the distant forest. These Outer World NPCs are simply insane. They actually gathered 1/3 of their total forces just to attack Million Forest City. Are they planning to fight to the death? 16th Cloud, the second Vice Guild leader of Shining Tiger and an expert who had reached Tier 5, said, frowning as she observed the Outer World's NPC army through a magic mirror. The Outer World NPCs and players had a numerical advantage over God's Domain's NPCs and players in terms of Tier 4 combatants. Logically, they should have split up and attacked multiple locations, as this would bring them the most benefits. The biggest advantage God's Domain's players had was their ability to get resurrected and rejoin the battle quickly. If the Outer World forces split up and attacked numerous locations simultaneously, God's Domain's players would likewise have to split up and guard multiple locations. Moreover, God's Domain's players would have to guard more locations than what was necessary to prevent ambushes. This would result in a huge waste of combat power. Hence, if God's Domain's players could gather all their experts in one location and have an all-out battle, it naturally couldn't be better for them. Maybe they think their chances of victory are slim, so they plan to concentrate their forces to secure a decisive victory. After all, God's Domain's various kingdoms and empires are continuously sending their NPC armies to reinforce the Fire Dragon Empire. The longer the war goes on, the better it would be for us. Perhaps they don't wish to drag things out any longer, Unyielding Soul's unyielding heart, who had similarly reached Tier 5, said, smiling. During the past month of battles at the Fire Dragon Empire's borders, the Empire's defenders had constantly been at a disadvantage. However, as time passed, the number of NPC armies gathered in the Empire increased, gradually tipping the scales to the Empire's side. Moreover, in this past month alone, over 100 players had reached Tier 5. Unyielding Heart had to admit that the War of Worlds was incredibly helpful to the development of players, especially during the defense of the Fire Dragon Empire. Although the Outer World NPCs scattered across the eastern continent hadn't fully gathered yet, the battles taking place at the Fire Dragon Empire's borders had never once ceased. Meanwhile, through constant battles with the Outer World's Tier 4 NPCs and players, God's Domain's Tier 4 players were able to improve their control and understanding of mana rapidly and continuously. In comparison, before the War of Worlds, Tier 4 players would have difficulty finding another Tier 4 player to fight, let alone Tier 4 players who were at the Void Realm standard or above. At one point, Unyielding Heart even wished that the War of Worlds would last a little longer. Let's hope I'm just overthinking things, 16th Cloud said, nodding. Truthfully, an all-out fight was something she hoped to see the most. This was because there were currently more than 80 Tier 5 players gathered in Million City Forest, not to mention over 100 flame beast puppets and 8 blue thunder flying ships. Every one of these war weapons created by Zero Wing possessed combat power at the Tier 5 standard. Including the Tier 5 NPCs, there were close to 300 Tier 5 combatants stationed in Million Forest City. Meanwhile, according to their investigations, the Outer World army stationed outside Million Forest City only had around 400 Tier 5 combatants in total. The difference wasn't particularly significant. Even if they traded 2-for-1 with the Outer World army, they would still end up winning the war since they could be resurrected and rejoin the battle almost immediately. In reality, 16th Cloud and Unyielding Heart weren't the only Tier 5 experts entertaining such thoughts. The Tier 5 experts of the other player forces present were also confident of victory in the upcoming battle. And so long as they won this battle, the Outer Worlds NPC army would have difficulty causing problems in the future. Some time later, when the number of players gathered in Million Forest City reached 70 million, a gigantic island suddenly appeared above the city, instantly triggering an uproar among the city's players and NPCs. Crap. Zero Wing. That is Zero Wing's mobile fortress. Isn't Zero Wing's mobile fortress stationed beside the secret Covenant Tower? Wait. This isn't the same one. I've seen the one stationed at the secret Covenant Tower, and that one only has 2 barriers protecting it. This one has 3. Zero Wing must have constructed a new mobile fortress. Amazing. Zero Wing truly is God's Domain's #1 guild. With this, those Outer World NPCs and players are finished. The mobile fortress that just appeared above Million Forest City was something basically everyone in God's Domain knew about. This was because the mobile fortress had allowed Zero Wing to establish its position in God's Domain. Now that there was also a mobile fortress protecting Million Forest City, how could everyone not get excited? Amid the excited cheers of Million Forest City's players, 16 players flew out of the mobile fortress. Upon seeing these 16 players, the players in the city grew even more excited. Even the city's Tier 5 commander and Tier 5 NPCs took the initiative to receive these 16 players. These 16 people were none other than Gentle Snow, Aqua Rose, Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, Yang Tianxing, Yi Luorfei, Silent Blade, Alluring Summer, Cold Shadow, Crimson Mask, Ji Luorong, Lifeless Thorn, Blue Frost, Zhao Yueru, White Feather, and Invincible Swallow. Crap. All of Zero Wing's top experts are here. Even a demigod NPC has gone to welcome them. What's going on here? I heard that the War Gods Temple recently added Zero Wing's Vice Guild leaders Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose to the 10 Saints. The 2 of them are even stronger than the NPC ranked 5th in the 10 Saints. Those ranked within the top 5 of the 10 Saints are supposedly close to rivaling Tier 6 existences, while those in the top 3 are basically Tier 6 gods in disguise. Zero Wing is truly a den of monsters. I heard that 3 of the 5 great super guilds' old monsters joined the 10 Saints only recently. Yet, Zero Wing actually has 2 people in the 10 Saints now. Moreover, both are ranked within the top 5. I wonder when I'll be able to join the 10 Saints. If I can get into the 10 Saints, I can die with no regrets. For a time, Zero Wing's members became the focal point of the entire Fire Dragon Empire. This was especially true for the players who had recently started playing God's Domain and were watching the live broadcast of Million Forest City's situation. When they looked at Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose, their eyes shone with ambition. They all wished they could become as strong and famous as these 2 women. Currently, Tier 5 NPCs were still existences to be feared for the various player forces, and even the King of a Kingdom had a difficult time meeting a Tier 5 NPC. Yet, these powerful Tier 5 NPCs were behaving respectfully toward Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose. This situation was simply unbelievable. However, of the players in the Fire Dragon Empire, only the Superpowers experts truly understood what it meant to be a member of the 10 Saints. The 10 Saints were existences standing at the very apex of God's Domain. Although Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose were Tier 5 players, just like the Superpowers Tier 5 experts, the difference between the 2 sides was like heaven and earth. Killing ordinary Tier 5 players was child's play for these 2 women. Meanwhile, when the Star Alliance's Galaxy Past and Purple Eye, who stood among the many players in Million Forest City, saw Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose, complex emotions appeared on their faces. Back when Zero Wing's operations were still confined to Star Moon Kingdom, the 2 of them had treated Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose as their rivals. Now, although Galaxy Past and Purple Eye had gotten promoted to Tier 4 and were even top tier among Tier 4 experts, they were merely a part of the crowd gathered in Million Forest City. In contrast, Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose already stood at the apex of God's Domain. They were now existences that countless players looked up to, and even Tier 5 NPCs and the 5 great super guilds' old monsters had to be wary of them. Galaxy Past and Purple Eye weren't alone in their feelings. Matt and Prosciutto from Mythology shared their complicated mood. When Fang Shahan had decided to betray Mythology and join Zero Wing, she had invited Matt to join her. However, Matt had refused her offer, believing he could develop much more rapidly in Mythology. Yet, reality turned out to be completely different. Matt was still stuck at Tier 4. In comparison, White Feather, who had joined Fang Shahan, had already reached Tier 5 and become an existence he had to look up to. As for Prosciutto, he was confused by Fang Shahan's rapid improvement. In terms of talent, he was much superior to Fang Shahan. Although he had also gotten promoted to Tier 5, there had been a huge difference between them when they were both still at Tier 4. However, his Tier 4 mana body's completion rate had only been at 118% when he had gotten promoted to Tier 5. Meanwhile, according to Mythology's investigation, Fang Shahan had gotten promoted to Tier 5 with her Tier 4 mana body's completion rate at 120%. Moreover, Odin had said that Fang Shahan was even under consideration as a reserve member for the 10 Saints and that it wouldn't be strange if she managed to defeat one of the 10 Saints in the near future. Her strength already approached that of demigod NPCs. In comparison, Prosciutto's combat power was only at the Tier 5 peak standard, still nowhere near the demigod standard. While Prosciutto was in a daze, Zero Wings members had arrived above Million Forest City's gate. "You guys are finally here," Unyielding Heart said, smiling at Zero Wings members. "With you here, it's even less likely for the Outerworld forces to take down Million Forest City." Even the weakest of Zero Wings' 16 Tier 5 experts present had combat power at the Tier 5 peak standard. Meanwhile, Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose could take on 10 to 15 ordinary Tier 5 combatants by themselves. Their participation in Million Forest City's defense had narrowed the gap in Tier 5 combatants between the two sides significantly. "What's our current situation?" Gentle Snow asked. At Gentle Snow's question, Aqua Rose and the others turned to look at Unyielding Heart. During these past few days, they had been fully focused on raiding a primordial ruin in the top of the world, so they weren't up to date on the Fire Dragon Empire's situation. Only after receiving the secret pavilion's notification did they rush over with the newly constructed mobile fortress. "While I can't say it's good, we definitely have a fighting chance," Unyielding Heart said. He then took out a memory crystal and displayed the information recorded in it. "According to our latest investigations, the Outerworld's NPC army has over 130 million Tier 3 NPCs, around 150,000 Tier 4 NPCs, and over 200 Tier 4 NPCs. As for the player army, there are close to 200 million Tier 3 players, over 50,000 Tier 4 players, and over 100 Tier 5 players." Upon hearing Unyielding Heart's words, many of the Tier 4 experts nearby felt suffocated. Setting aside the Tier 3 players, the difference in Tier 4 players between the two sides was simply massive. Even now, Million Forest City only had around 15,000 Tier 4 players gathered. In comparison, the other side had over 50,000. If Million Forest City's defensive magic array shattered, there was a high chance that some of these Outerworld Tier 4 players would sneak past the city's defenders and reach the City Lord's mansion. That would spell the end for the city. After all, the City Lord's mansion's defensive magic array wasn't as strong as the city's. The only fortunate matter was that there wasn't a significant difference in Tier 5 combatants between the two sides. With the help of the city's magic arrays, they might be able to repel the Outerworld forces. It seems the Outerworld forces are intent on winning this battle, no matter what. Aqua Rose was slightly astonished when she heard Unyielding Heart's report, and she turned reflexively toward the distant forest. An army of such size and power was more than capable of destroying an empire. "Isn't that just perfect? If we can get rid of this army, dealing with the follow-up will become much easier," Fire Dance said, fighting spirit burning in her eyes. They had suffered a miserable defeat in the battle in Blackwing City. However, her strength had undergone an earth-shattering transformation during the past month. Apart from touching upon the entry level of utilizing a world lore, she had also acquired 2 pieces of legendary equipment. Including her legendary weapon, she now had 3 legendary items. She was confident she could now put up a fight against a fallen archangel. None of Zero Wings members refuted Fire Dance's words, either. With Shifeng's guidance, they had improved their equipment standard significantly during this past month. Although they didn't gain any additional legendary weapons, they did acquire quite a few pieces of legendary equipment. Moreover, even the weakest piece of equipment on them now was fragmented legendary equipment. In equipment standards, they were in no way inferior to Tier 5 NPCs. Among their group of 16, Gentle Snow, Aqua Rose, and Violet Cloud were the luckiest, having each acquired a complete set of fragmented legendary set equipment. In terms of basic attributes, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they rivaled Tier 6 players. However, just when everyone was thinking about how to cope with the Outer World Army's offensive, the Outer World Army hidden within the distant forest suddenly moved. Boom! Accompanied by a thundering noise, heavy clouds suddenly appeared over the forest, bringing darkness to the area. The sky then split apart, and two giant claws several hundred meters long descended from the massive tear in space. A short moment later, a monster several dozen kilometers tall emerged from the dark void. It had a gigantic mouth and hundreds of eyes and claws. The monster also exuded a turbid mist that corroded the surrounding space, causing it to disintegrate. The sight of this monster shocked the people in Million Forest City and the Outer World Army. So, this is the World Eater of Legends. 100 Ghosts' elder Windshadow, who stood in the forest outside Million Forest City, couldn't help doubting his eyes as he looked at the big-mouthed monster before him. The World Eater was a monster recorded in legends, and he had only found out about its existence after stumbling across a record of it. The World Eater was born in the endless void, and its sole purpose in life was to devour worlds. In front of a World Eater, even the dragon race, God's domain's strongest race, was nothing. Even a Tier 4 infant World Eater could devour a Tier 5 dragon. Meanwhile, the World Eater in front of him was an adult. At its current strength, even Tier 6 gods would have to avoid confronting it. When Awakened Abyss, who had already reached Tier 5, saw the behemoth in the sky, excitement filled his eyes as he exclaimed, "Amazing! We're sure to win now." World Eater, Chaos Beast, Legendary, Level 210 trillion. Similar to Awakened Abyss, the other Outer World players present also grew excited when they saw the World Eater. However, when Fire Dance and the others in Million Forest City saw the World Eater, a grim expression appeared on their faces. Although they didn't know what a World Eater was, they could still tell what a terrifying existence it was just by looking at its 3 trillion HP. After all, the average level 200 legendary monster only had around 300 billion HP, and even a Tier 5 Fallen Archangel only had 900 billion HP. Yet, the World Eater had more than 3 times that amount. Activate the defensive magic array. All magic cannon towers prepare to fire. Victory for the Fire Dragon Empire. Mechabod, a level 200 demigod NPC and the commander of Million Forest City's army, ordered when he saw the World Eater starting to make its way toward the city. A total of 4 magic barriers promptly appeared over Million Forest City, the barriers stabilizing the space within a 10,000-yard radius of the city. The barriers also created a separate world within them, isolating Million Forest City from the outside world and preventing the World Eater's powerful mental oppression from spreading into the city. Miniature World. After seeing the city's defensive magic array activating, Aqua Rose used the Ring of Gospel that Chiffon had passed to her. During their exploration of the primordial ruin in the top of the world, they had managed to upgrade the Ring of Gospel to the legendary rank. Now, the ring could call down a complete miniature world, and its suppression effect was only slightly inferior to the world mirrors. Although each activation of miniature world now cost 5,000 mana stones, instead of just 5,000 magic crystals, the skill's duration had increased from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. The skill's AoE had also expanded to 50,000 yards, and even Tier 5 players wouldn't be able to make use of the ambient mana within the affected area. Moreover, all hostile units below Tier 6 would be subjected to a 30% reduction in basic attributes and physique, while Tier 6 enemies would be subjected to a 15% reduction. After Miniature World's activation, the Outer World's Tier 3 combatants charging toward Million Forest City stumbled and fell to the ground like dominoes. Their movements also became as slow as a turtle, making combat practically impossible for them. As for the Tier 4 combatants, although they retained a certain degree of combat power, they lost their ability to fly. Unfortunately, Miniature World had very little effect on the World Eater in the sky, the Chaos Beast losing only 10% of its basic attributes. Even so, seeing this situation still let Million Forest City's defenders breathe out a sigh of relief. With the Outer Worlds Tier 3 and Tier 4 combatants incapacitated for the most part, they could focus on dealing with the World Eater and the Outer Worlds Tier 5 combatants, 1,000 plus flying ships, and 10,000 plus Tier 4 flying mounts. Holy Realm! However, the Outer Worlds' various superpowers had come prepared for such a situation. Immediately, 1,000 Tier 4 magical class players cooperated to create a gigantic, three-layered barrier to counter Miniature Worlds' effects. Although the three-layered barrier didn't completely nullify Miniature Worlds' effects, it still allowed all of the Outer Worlds combatants to use the ambient mana. Only the debuff on basic attributes and physique remained. The next moment, hundreds of thousands of Tier 4 combatants and millions of Tier 3 combatants resumed their charge toward Million Forest City. In the sky, the World Eater lashed out at the city's defensive magic array with its several hundred claws, every claw carrying the power to crush time and space. Attack with everything you've got. Stop those claws. Seeing the approaching claws, Fire Dance promptly issued a command to the mobile fortress and all of the Blue Thunder flying ships present. Beams of destruction shot at the World Eater's claws one after another. Simultaneously, Million Forest City's magic elven towers and magic cannon towers also bombarded the World Eater. The series of attacks and explosions turned the sky outside of Million Forest City into an empty void. Unfortunately, these attacks managed to deflect only a portion of the World Eater's claws, over 100 claws connected with the city's defensive magic array. The next moment, the four-layered magic barrier shattered under the World Eater's attacks, unable to withstand the World Eater's power. All hail the World Eater. It's time for you natives to go to hell. When the Outer Worlds players saw the city's defensive magic array shattering after only one exchange, they burst into laughter. Originally, they thought this would be a tough fight. However, the battle ended up entirely one-sided. Now, even if they did nothing, the NPCs and the World Eater could still destroy Million Forest City easily. Meanwhile, the players inside Million Forest City fell into despair at this moment. How were they supposed to fight with such a horrifying monster on the Outer World Army's side? There's no other way. Aqua and I will keep that World Eater busy. Everyone else, do everything you can to stop these invaders from entering the city, Gentle Snow said as she looked at the several dozen Tier 5 NPCs hindering the World Eater. So long as we keep the core magic array safe, more of God's Domain's experts and NPCs will come to support us. The various guild executives present nodded in response to Gentle Snow's command and promptly went into action. They all took out their trump cards and readied themselves to fight a war of attrition with the Outer World Army. Although the World Eater was powerful, victory still wasn't out of reach. Currently, many of God's Domain's experts had yet to reach Million Forest City. Hence, the longer they dragged out this fight, the higher their chances of victory. Subsequently, Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose flew toward the World Eater. Upon getting within attack range of the World Eater, Gentle Snow promptly swung her greatsword and executed her mana technique, Spatial Cleave. Several dozen sword lights cut at the World Eater's claws, attacking Million Forest City, sending them off course. Aqua Rose waved her staff and summoned numerous gigantic serpents made of water. She then had the water serpents bite the World Eater's claws, preventing them from getting close to Million Forest City. Are they monsters? The Outer World players gasped when they saw Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose putting up a good fight against the World Eater. Even the Outer World Tier 5 experts were astonished by this spectacle. All of the World Eater's claws carried power at the Tier 6 peak standard. Even Tier 5 experts wielding legendary weapons could block only a few hits from these claws with their legendary weapons' active skills. However, Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose did not use their weapon skills. They stopped the World Eater's claws using only mana techniques and combat techniques. For a time, Gentle Snow, Aqua Rose, and the World Eater became the absolute center of the sky. Even other Tier 5 players dared not approach the three of them, as even the shockwaves of their clashes could kill ordinary Tier 5 players. Apart from Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose, only Tier 5 combatants dared fight in the sky above Million Forest City. The two sides' Tier 4 combatants kept to the ground because those who tried to fly would get swept up by the shockwaves and turn into ashes the next moment. Hence, the Tier 4s could only become cannon fodder on the ground like the Tier 3 combatants. Currently, More than 700 Tier 5 combatants were fighting in the sky. Originally, Million Forest City's Tier 5 combatants should have been weaker due to their significant numerical disadvantage. Yet, the two sides turned out evenly matched in reality, confusing the Outer World Tier 5 combatants. Damn it! Why are these natives so strong? The speechless awakened Abyss glared at Ji Luorong, who was fighting him. Not only was Ji Luorong fighting two Tier 5 NPCs simultaneously, but she also managed to pin him down while doing so. The level of skill she demonstrated in mana utilization was simply unbelievable. Moreover, Ji Luorong wasn't even the most conspicuous of them all. Instead, the most conspicuous person was Zero Wing's Violet Cloud, the girl he had once considered recruiting into 100 Ghosts. She was practically a monster. From what he could tell, Violet Cloud should only be at the Domain Realm. Yet, she could actually hold her own against over a dozen Tier 5 NPCs. If not for Windshadow, who wielded a legendary weapon, joining the fight, one or two of these Tier 5 NPCs would have already died in battle. As for Fire Dance and Fang Shahan, these two women were practically Grim Reapers as they weaved through the shadows of the battlefield. Under their coordinated attacks, they could kill a Tier 5 NPC within 5 moves and a Tier 5 player within 3 moves. As more time passed, Million Forest City's Tier 5 combatants gradually began to gain the upper hand in the battle. Elder Windshadow, we've already lost more than 24 Tier 5 players. We'll be at a serious disadvantage if this situation continues, Jade Leaf, who had repelled a Tier 5 NPC with her battle axe, said to Windshadow when she saw Fire Dance and Fang Shahan killing another Tier 5 player. Nobody can stop Zero Wing's Fire Dance and Cold Shadow. Originally, their side had over 170 Tier 5 players. Now, only a few minutes into the battle, they had already lost more than 10% of this number. In comparison, the other side had lost only a dozen or so Tier 5 players. Moreover, these fallen Tier 5 players managed to get resurrected quickly and rejoin the battle. They had also prepared replacement equipment beforehand, so they lost hardly any combat power even after rejoining the battle. Windshadow also recognized their dire situation and frowned involuntarily. He had never thought Zero Wing would have so many monstrously strong experts, apart from Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose. Currently, Zero Wing's Tier 5 players were doing as much work as all of Million Forest City's other Tier 5 players combined. Just as Windshadow was about to have everyone retreat, a spatial tear suddenly appeared some distance from Million Forest City. A young man wearing a light blue robe with dark purple divine patterns on his face then walked out of this spatial tear. A fallen archangel followed after him, and this fallen archangel was none other than Ziluware. With the arrival of these two people, Million Forest City fell deathly silent. Even the Tier 5 combatants in the sky automatically stopped fighting. This was because the young man's presence was simply too intense. His presence was akin to the midday sun. The aura he exuded while just standing still inflicted a stinging pain into everyone's soul. Not even the Tier 5 combatants present were immune to this pain. What a bunch of rubbish. You still haven't dealt with these ants even now, the scholar bellowed angrily as he glared at the Outer World Army's commander-in-chief. My lord, these heaven-blessed individuals are much stronger than we expected, and even the World Eater is incapable of going against them for the time being. Fez Tade, the Outer World Army's commander-in-chief and one of the 17 stars of the Holy Grail, said anxiously as he looked at the youth before him. Them. Scholar glanced at Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose, who were hovering beside the World Eater, a look of surprise appearing on his face. Transmigrators? No wonder they can deal with the World Eater. However, they are still too weak. After saying so, the scholar pointed a finger at Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose, a 5-fold magic array appearing at his fingertip. Immediately, everyone on the battlefield felt time stagnate. The Tier 3 combatants present even found their thoughts freezing. Tier 6 Curse, Hand of Death. The next moment, a titanic claw appeared above Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose. This claw was as large as the World Eater, and it swiped at the two immobilized women as soon as it took shape. It's over. How can there be such a monstrous existence? When 16th Cloud, Unyielding Heart, and the other Tier 5 players saw the gigantic claw from a distance, despair overwhelmed them. Not only did the scholar slow down time for the entire battlefield, but he had even used a Tier 6 curse. This single attack could probably wipe out the entire Million Forest City, not just Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose. However, when the monstrous claw was only several yards away from Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose, a sword light suddenly shot out from Million Forest City and struck the claw. Boom! Accompanied by a loud explosion, the restraints on the battlefield's time shattered. Simultaneously, the space above Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose transformed into an empty void. The attack was blocked. Something like that can be blocked. Who did it? Everyone gaped in shock at the empty void in the sky, then automatically turned to look at the sword light's origin. The next moment, what entered everyone's eyes was a cloaked man wielding a golden long sword flying out of Million Forest City's teleportation hall. Everyone present gasped involuntarily. Tier 6. He actually got promoted to Tier 6. Everyone present was very familiar with the cloaked man. This was because he was none other than Shifeng. However, the aura Shifeng exuded was simply unbelievable, especially for players who had visited ruins left behind by gods. The power they sensed from Shifeng was one that they had only ever felt in those ruins. Only, Shifeng's aura was several hundred times more powerful. Indeed. That was divine might. Guild leader, you succeeded. Fang Shahan asked as she looked at Shifeng, who had arrived before her. Although the divine might Shifeng radiated proved that he had reached Tier 6, Fang Shahan couldn't help asking for confirmation. Tier 6. This was the true pinnacle of God's domain. I succeeded. Shifeng nodded with a smile. Actually, he also wanted to say that he didn't just get promoted to Tier 6 with an ordinary divine body, but with a superior divine body instead. The difference between the two was akin to that between mythic and superior mythic monsters. The two were on entirely different levels. Upon hearing Shifeng's acknowledgement, Zero Wings members grew ecstatic. Now that Shifeng had reached Tier 6, the Outer Worlds NPCs and players would no longer be a problem. Moreover, Zero Wing would become God's Domain's bona fide #1 guild from now on. The Outer World players were dumbfounded by this development. After all, the Outer World's various superpowers were practically going crazy just trying to get their respective guilds' best talents promoted to Tier 5. Getting one of their members to Tier 6 was something none of them had ever dreamed of doing at this stage of the game. After all, none of them had any information on how players could go about reaching Tier 6. So what if you've reached Tier 6? You're nothing but another ant trapped in this world. Do you really think you're a match for me? The scholar said contemptuously as he looked at Shifeng. He then pointed the golden staff he held at Shifeng. Suddenly, the world fell silent once more. When the scholar launched his previous attack, the Tier 4 combatants present had still retained some of their consciousness. Now, even the Tier 5 combatants present found their brains stagnating significantly. It was evident that time on the battlefield had slowed by a far greater extent this time. The next moment, dark purple chains engraved with divine markings emerged from the sky and the earth. Upon seeing these chains, even the World Eater shuddered in fear. After these chains had completely materialized, they shot toward Shifeng from all directions. When the Tier 5 combatants present sensed the aura of these purple chains, an unprecedented fear overwhelmed them. Even their souls were instinctively warning them not to touch these chains, no matter what. Are these the legendary chains of law? Shifeng was slightly surprised when he saw the dark purple chains. The ancient god's legacy he acquired contained information on the chains of law, stating that these chains carried power surpassing the Tier 6 peak standard. Even a Tier 6 god would have difficulty moving when caught by these chains. And unless the Tier 6 god's strength surpassed the Tier 6 peak standard, they would eventually die to these chains. Seeing the hundreds of chains of law closing in, Shifeng unsheathed Solomon's sword and brandished it together with the light of two worlds. Swords orbit. Shifeng moved freely, unaffected by the time stagnation affecting the battlefield. A galaxy of stars formed around him, each of these stars carrying earth-shattering power. These stars struck down the chains of law that came close to Shifeng, preventing them from coming into contact with him. After striking down all of the chains of law, the stars surrounding Shifeng spread into the surroundings. A moment later, The battlefield's stagnant time started flowing once more. Impossible. A look of surprise and confusion appeared on the scholar's calm countenance when he saw Shifeng emerge unscathed from his attack. Those were the chains of law. Even an actual Tier 6 god would have to flee when confronted with those chains, as they would lose their life if even one of those chains latched onto their bodies. Yet, Shifeng had deflected all of the chains with a simple sword technique. What the scholar found even more unbelievable was that his time stagnation technique was utterly ineffective against Shifeng. Do you find it strange? Shifeng chuckled at the look of surprise on the scholar's face. Do you think you ancient gods are the only ones who can have superior divine bodies in God's domain? The superior divine body could be said to be the main factor behind the strength of ancient gods. This was because only with a superior divine body could one perfectly utilize the power of the world. Meanwhile, the chains of law was one method of utilizing the world's power. However, if Shifeng similarly imbued the world's power into his swordsmanship, he naturally could stop the chains easily. You have a superior divine body? The scholar was thunderstruck when he heard Shifeng's words. The superior divine body was something even ancient gods had difficulty creating. Meanwhile, in the scholar's eyes, Shifeng was nothing but an ignorant ant, yet Shifeng actually had a superior divine body. If the scholar told this matter to other ancient gods, none of them were likely to believe him. Your rampage ends here. After saying so, Shifeng disappeared and reappeared in front of the scholar, the speed of his movement so quick that it seemed as if he had been standing in front of the scholar all this time. He then activated World Breaker and Final Sword simultaneously. Two sources of light immediately enveloped his swords and fused perfectly. The combination of these two skills was something Shifeng had been continuously practicing and perfecting over the past month. Apart from the fusion of these two skills, Shifeng had also been modifying swords transmigration, and he eventually ended up creating an advanced silver combat technique. Swords ripple. A torrent of light cut across the sky, erasing everything that existed in front of Shifeng. When the light faded, the scholar was nowhere to be seen. Instead, hovering in his place were 3 of the 7 treasures. The next moment, the translucent figure of a person appeared in the empty void, and this person was none other than the scholar. At this time, though, the scholar no longer had any divine markings on his face, he looked and felt no different from an ordinary youth. Damn it! It's this outcome again. Why do you ignorant ants always come foiling my plans? Bellowed the scholar, who had been reduced to a soul, as he glared at Shifeng with eyes full of resentment and anger. However, his anger soon faded, and he started laughing. Don't get too proud of yourself. You can't do anything to me even if you have a superior divine body. My soul is eternal and indestructible. What you have destroyed is nothing but a shell to house my soul. I can recreate more of such shells in no time at all. Sooner or later, I will have all of you ignorant ants disappear from this world. After saying so, the scholar laughed louder and louder, his mood getting better and better. The scholar's words made everyone on the battlefield shudder. If a monster like the scholar could resurrect infinitely, then it would be an absolute nightmare for them. That's right. You indeed have an immortal soul, and even true ancient gods can't erase your existence, Shifeng said, nodding as he looked at the scholar. He then chuckled and continued, however, while your soul might be indestructible, it can be infinitely weakened. I'm guessing it'll take you a long time to recover if that happens, right? After saying so, Shifeng collected the 3 items in front of him. He then took out the other 7 treasures. Immediately, the 7 treasures resonated with one another and instantly recovered to their peak states, revealing their original brilliance. You. The scholar's expression instantly changed when he saw the 7 treasures, and he turned and tried to flee into the void. However, Shifeng did not give the scholar any opportunities to do so at all, grabbing the repaired soul orb and activating it. Devour. The soul orb immediately began absorbing the scholar's soul, continuously weakening it. After this situation continued for 4 minutes, the scholar's soul disappeared, and the soul orb produced a 9-colored crystal of souls. System. Congratulations. You have completed the mythic quest Ancient Gods Awakening. Rewarding 1 Ancient God's Soul Crystal and 2 levels of World Authority. Ancient God's Soul Crystal? After observing the 9-colored crystal of souls for a moment, Shifeng tossed it into his mouth and swallowed it. He wanted to see what effects the ancient god's soul crystal had. Moreover, doing so would prevent the scholar from regaining his power. The soul orb might have absorbed the power of the scholar's soul and made it seem as if the scholar had died, but that wasn't true at all. In time, the scholar would still gradually recover his strength. This was also what made ancient gods amazing. As soon as Shifeng swallowed the ancient god's soul crystal, he felt a tingling and burning sensation in his brain. It was completely different from the refreshing sensation he felt when he swallowed the crystal of souls made from the fallen archangel Garudika's soul. Only after this burning sensation had continued for several minutes did it gradually disappear. Is this the Tier 6 peak standard? When Shifeng looked at the world around him, he found its clarity and realism unprecedented. No. Even if my concentration reached the Tier 6 peak standard, there shouldn't be such a significant change. Did I just reach the mental strength Grandmaster standard? Apart from a breakthrough to the mental strength Grandmaster standard, Shifeng couldn't think of any other explanation for this situation. This was because his current thought process was at least 10 times faster than before. He could also manipulate mana from 7 luminaries crystals as if it was soft cotton. However, Shifeng didn't pay too much attention to these changes, as he still had a bunch of enemies he had to deal with in front of him. Run! Everyone, retreat! Upon seeing Shifeng slay the scholar, the outerworld NPCs and players started frantically fleeing the battlefield. All of them wanted nothing more than to run back to the world passage right now. They felt that only by returning to their own god's domain would they truly be safe from Shifeng. However, Shifeng had no intention of letting any of these people escape. With a swing of his sword, he effortlessly massacred the outerworld forces and wiped out the forest ahead of him. Let alone escaping, the army of millions didn't even get to leave their ashes behind on the battlefield. The conclusion of this battle sent tremors across God's domain. The outerworld NPCs and players in other parts of the eastern continent promptly retreated to their home world upon receiving news of Shifeng's achievements, none of them daring to stay behind for even a moment longer. In addition, Zero Wing became the undisputed #1 guild in God's domain because of this battle. As a result, countless players started trying to join Zero Wing, and Zero Wing's several guild cities became overcrowded with players. However, Shifeng paid no attention to these requests to join Zero Wing. Instead, he simply handed off his responsibilities to his vice guild leaders. After turning in the 7 Treasures main storyline quest, he chose to log out of the game and meet with Xia Wuyuan. After all, he was very curious to find out about Phoenix Rain's matter. And now that he had fulfilled the conditions Xia Wuyuan had given him, he should be qualified to find out more about the matter. Not to mention, after he devoured the ancient god's soul crystal, he could sense things that he had never been able to sense before. He had many questions regarding these new findings, and he estimated that Phoenix Rain would have answers. Middle layer, Green God Courtyard. The Green God Courtyard was a place specifically reserved for the Green God Company's internal members. Apart from serving as a residence, it was also the office that handled the middle layer's various affairs. There weren't a lot of people in the Green God Courtyard. Even after arriving in front of Xia Wuyuan's residence, Shifeng had come across only several dozen people. From this, he could tell that the Green God Company didn't have many internal members. When Shifeng entered Xia Wuyuan's residence, he found the old man sitting in the living room and brewing tea in front of the coffee table. There was also a cup of freshly brewed tea on the other side of the coffee table, as if Xia Wuyuan had known ahead of time that Shifeng would visit him. Pointing at the sofa opposite himself, Xia Wuyuan looked at Shifeng and said, "Have a seat." "You knew I would come to find you now?" Shifeng couldn't help asking. "Of course. I know everything you do in God's domain," Xia Wuyuan said. Taking a sip of tea, he smiled and continued, "I also know that you've long since broken through to the 3-star mental strength master standard and that you've already reached the grandmaster standard now." "You knew." Realization dawned upon Shifeng when he heard Xia Wuyuan's answer. It seems the Green God Company really is the developer behind God's domain. "You're only half correct," Xia Wuyuan said, shaking his head. "What do you mean?" Shifeng asked. "The Green God Company didn't develop God's domain. Instead, We only run it, Xia Wuyuan explained. The Green God Company didn't develop it. Shifeng was a little surprised by this answer. From what he knew, there shouldn't be another company on Earth with the technology required to develop a game such as God's Domain. How is this possible? Could there be a corporation in this world capable of surpassing the Green God Company's technology? Didn't you want to see Phoenix Rain? Xia Wuyuan said suddenly. Confused by Xia Wuyuan's sudden mention of Phoenix Rain, Shifeng asked curiously, "Can I meet with her now?" "Of course. You now have the qualification." Xia Wuyuan snapped his fingers, and a hologram of a person suddenly appeared beside him. This person was none other than Phoenix Rain. "Your improvement speed really is as unbelievable as ever," Phoenix Rain said, smiling as she looked at Shifeng. "If not for Elder Xia keeping me updated, I wouldn't have dared believe you've already grown so much." "Where are you now?" Shifeng asked, getting straight to the point. He had been very curious about Phoenix Rain's sudden appearance. In their previous meeting, she had even spoken as if she had long since known that the scholar would cause a problem in God's domain, hence, she had warned him of the scholar. Her understanding of God's domain was simply incredible. The Green God Company's refusal to let others meet with Phoenix Rain was also puzzling. "It seems you've already guessed that I'm not present in the world you live in." Smiling, Phoenix Rain explained, "You are correct in your assumption. I am currently living in neither Earth nor God's domain. Instead, I am in a world beyond God's domain. To be precise, I am living in the true God's domain." "You're not in the real world, but the true God's domain? What do you mean? Did your soul get digitized?" Shifeng was shocked. Looking at Shifeng's confused expression, Phoenix Rain chuckled and said, "My soul didn't get digitized. Rather, my spirit is currently located in a special three-dimensional world. The God's domain you've been playing in all this time is actually another three-dimensional world as well. Because of a unique reason, I ended up getting smuggled into a higher-level three-dimensional world, or a main three-dimensional world, if you will. On the other hand, the God's domain you've been playing in is merely one of the countless subworlds of this main three-dimensional world." Three-dimensional world? The God's domain I've been playing in is only one of the many subworlds of a main three-dimensional world. Shifeng suddenly felt he lacked the brains to process the information Phoenix Rain provided. Although the various phenomena in God's domain could serve as proof that the world of God's domain wasn't just a simple virtual world, calling it a real three-dimensional world was still a little too much of a stretch. Just what kind of technology was necessary to let someone mentally connect to another three-dimensional world? What she says is true. The God's domain you are playing in is indeed a three-dimensional world. However, this three-dimensional world is very special, and outsiders can enter it only through their minds, Xia Wuyuan explained, smiling when he saw the skeptical look on Shifeng's face. "Now that you're a mental strength grandmaster, you are also qualified to know the Green God Company's biggest secret. I previously told you that the Green God Company's founder is a mental strength grandmaster. He is also the first human in our world to develop his mental strength to the grandmaster level. After reaching the grandmaster level, he happened across a device that a four-dimensional civilization left behind for all three-dimensional civilizations. This device allows people to enter a special three-dimensional world created by the four-dimensional civilization. This three-dimensional world is akin to a game world where everything is statisticalized, and people in this world can continuously grow stronger by training. In addition, the four-dimensional civilization left all its technologies in this three-dimensional world and made it so that whichever three-dimensional civilization succeeds in taking control of this world would inherit all its technologies. Therefore, any three-dimensional civilization that discovers this special world will try to compete for it. After all, with the four-dimensional civilization's technologies, not only can a civilization's citizens gain a near-infinite lifespan, but a three-dimensional civilization can also become the ruler of all other three-dimensional civilizations. A four-dimensional civilization? Although Shifeng still felt skeptical after listening to Xia Wuyuan's explanation, he was now open to the possibility of God's domain being an actual three-dimensional world. After all, the humans of Earth were merely three-dimensional creatures. They couldn't possibly fathom the strength of a four-dimensional civilization, just like how two-dimensional creatures couldn't understand three-dimensional creatures. Our world is very fortunate. Not only did it produce a mental strength grandmaster, but we even discovered the device the four-dimensional civilization left behind. Hence, our world has the qualification to compete for the special three-dimensional world. It is also because of this special world that the Green God Company has managed to create so many miracles thus far. However, we were very weak when we first started out in that special world and could hardly acquire anything. This is because only mental strength grandmasters are capable of using the inherited device, and each grandmaster can bring along a maximum of only 60 people when entering that special world. Moreover, all the companions must be at the half-step grandmaster standard. Hence, the group our people formed in that special world is no different from an insignificant small guild in God's domain. Fortunately, as the people of our world continued developing and the number of half-step grandmasters increased, we eventually managed to secure the rights to control a subsidiary world, which is also the God's domain you are currently playing. Since it is only a subworld, the entry conditions aren't as stringent. So long as one isn't an infant or a child, one may freely enter this subworld. Improving one's mental strength also becomes a lot easier in this subworld, so we can keep developing half-step grandmasters. In your case, you even managed to become a mental strength grandmaster. Speaking up to this point, Xia Wuyuan looked at Shifeng in excitement. Now that Earth had gained one more mental strength master, they could bring an additional 60 half-step mental strength grandmasters to the main three-dimensional world. This would greatly enhance Earth's overall strength. So, this is why other gods' domains are trying to invade us. They were trying to gain the ruling rights to another subworld. Realization dawned upon Shifeng. The subworlds of God's domain were akin to a nursery for nurturing newcomers. The difference between having and not having a subworld and between having one or more subworlds was massive. Entering the main world isn't an easy task. The more subworlds a civilization controls, the higher their chances of producing Tier 6 players or half-step mental strength grandmasters. In Phoenix Rain's case, she managed to enter the main world out of sheer luck. It's a pity nobody else managed to be that lucky, Xia Wuyuan said, sighing ruefully. Phoenix Rain's entry into the main world can be considered a rare opportunity. If she logged out of the game, she would no longer have this opportunity. Thus, upon noticing the anomaly, we immediately transferred her body to the core area. With the core area's power, she won't have to worry about her physical body even if she remains in the main world for a long period. Shifeng understood what Xia Wuyuan was trying to say. Since a mental strength grandmaster could bring only 60 people with them into the main world, every additional combatant Earth could get into the main world was incredibly precious. Hence, it was only natural for the Green God Company to want Phoenix Rain to remain connected to the main world. But it's fine now. With you here, we'll have a much easier time in the main world, Xia Wuyuan said, smiling. It doesn't matter even if Phoenix Rain returns since you have brought 60 additional slots to our world. Once news of your breakthrough spreads, the various upper zones old bastards will probably try to buy these slots from you. However, you mustn't sell the slots to them on a whim. Back then, those old bastards stole a lot of resources from Yuantian City's upper zone. Our upper zone will be relying on you to reclaim our reputation. If you wish to deal with Fu Jiuzhong, you can also apply to get him banished from the upper zone. I bet that old bastard in Haitian City's upper zone won't dare say anything about it. Shifeng nodded at Xia Wuyuan's words. As for Fu Jiuzhong, Shifeng was no longer concerned about the Infinity Master. This was because a mental strength grandmaster was many times more powerful than a 3-star mental strength master. He could even make Fu Jiuzhong suffer a mental breakdown. Afterward, just as Xia Wuyuan said, the general managers of the various upper zones around the world all paid a visit to Yuantian City's upper zone, and every one of them wanted the entry slots for the main world of God's domain. Moreover, without Shifeng saying anything, Haitian City's upper zone had taken the initiative to banish and imprison Fu Jiuzhong. However, Shifeng did not casually sell his entry slots. After all, now that he knew the main God's domain's importance, he naturally had to give zero-wing priority for these slots. In the end, he chose to sell only 10 slots to the top 10 upper zones in the world, gaining one favor from these upper zones, the creation of his own upper zone. The upper zones located around the world weren't natural occurrences. Instead, they were created using the four-dimensional civilization's technology. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, the creation of every upper zone required a lot of resources, many of which these top-ranking upper zones could provide. Once he had these resources, so long as he obtained a few more items from the main god's domain, he could create his very own upper zone. Once he had his own upper zone, he would no longer have to follow the rules of other upper zones. He could bring anyone he wanted into his upper zone. Time passed swiftly. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had already gone by since Shifeng became a mental strength grandmaster. During these 3 months, Shifeng had brought his family and Zero Wing's many core members into Yuantian City's upper zone one after another. Afterward, he had Zero Wing compete fervently for resources and players in God's domain. He had even tasked the guild with preparing to invade the outer world and plunder the resources there. In addition, thanks to the upper zone's resources and the ancient god's legacy, Gentle Snow, Aqua Rose, Violet Cloud, Fire Dance, Cold Shadow, Yang Tianxing, Lifeless Thorn, and Blue Frost also successfully reached Tier 6. This meant that they had become half-step mental strength grandmasters and were qualified to enter the main god's domain. Inside a large mansion in the core area of Yuantian City's upper zone. After looking at Gentle Snow and the others, who lay inside their respective special rest cabins, Shifeng entered the main cabin and readied himself to begin a new journey. Login. Chapter 2919. Chapter 1 SS1, Gentle Snow, 1, March 6, 2129. Dragon Demon War, a virtual reality game known for being incredibly realistic, having a realism rate reaching 90%. The game also constantly remained one of the top 30 most popular virtual reality games in the world. However, at this time, the game had also reached a perfect ending because of one final kingdom war. In the battle between 4 first-rate guilds and more than 20 second-rate guilds, the first-rate guild Ouroboros emerged as the victor and became Dragon Demon War's kingdom overlord. With this victory serving as its base, Ouroboros would have a massive advantage for its future endeavors in the game. Because of this victory, over 100,000 Ouroboros members had gathered in the capital city and were currently celebrating. Meanwhile, leading this victory celebration was none other than the person known as the Snow Goddess, Gentle Snow. Gentle Snow had joined Ouroboros for only 2 years. However, with her exquisite and perfect body combined with her divine appearance, she had long since become a living advertisement for Ouroboros. In fact, any company seeking to invite her to do an ad would have to schedule an appointment for 2 years later. Inside a bright and tidy bedroom located on the top floor of Ouroboros's main headquarters, Zhao Yueru, who wore a red miniskirt and possessed a sexy and curvaceous figure, watched as Gentle Snow climbed out of her virtual gaming cabin. She then grumbled a complaint. "Qingxue, aren't you working a little too hard? You fought non-stop for over a week in this war, yet you still choose to continue working instead of relaxing. I ended up having to visit that new restaurant by myself." Hearing Zhao Yueru's complaint, Gentle Snow, who had just changed into a white t-shirt, smiled wryly. "Yueru, you know as well as I do about the current situation in Ouroboros. Although I've already made a name for myself, I have only joined the guild recently, after all. I won't be able to win the Grand Elder's support without sufficient merit. But didn't you win in the final battle this time? Those Grand Elders should have nothing to say after this, right?" Zhao Yueru couldn't help but feel distressed at seeing Gentle Snow working so desperately. After all, Gentle Snow was her best friend. However, it was also because she was Gentle Snow's best friend that she understood Gentle Snow's difficulties and why Gentle Snow couldn't live freely like herself. For the sake of taking control over the guild her elder brother left behind, Gentle Snow had to accomplish merits that could convince everyone in the guild of her abilities. After all, the White Clan Group wasn't the sole owner of Ouroboros. There were still several other companies backing Ouroboros's development. Meanwhile, these companies definitely wouldn't hand over Ouroboros to Gentle Snow simply because she was the younger sister of Ouroboros's creator. This was because Ouroboros was now a famous first-rate guild, and many interests were involved with the guild. Just the sponsorships and advertising fees Ouroboros received annually amounted to more than 1 billion credits. Not to mention, the guild still received various other benefits from the games it took part in. These merits are still not enough, Gentle Snow said, shaking her head. Recently, not only did Cao Chenghua make a fortune from 2 virtual reality games, but he has even gained the full support of a large company. If I rely only on my achievements in Dragon Demon War, I would be fortunate if I can match him. If I want to have those Grand Elders stand on my side, I will still need to do more. Ouroboros really is a troublesome guild. If you were to go to any other guild, you would have long since become the guild leader there with your merits, Zhao Yueru said, sighing. She then suggested, now that you're done with work, I bet you're hungry, right? Let's head to that new restaurant. I heard that the restaurant added a few new dishes to its menu yesterday, and they seem to be quite popular. I've been holding back myself because of you. Looking at Zhao Yueru's glowing eyes, Gentle Snow sighed helplessly. If you can direct half your passion for food toward virtual reality games, you would have long since become one of the guild's top-ranking experts instead of being stuck as just an ordinary core member right now. Gentle Snow couldn't help but feel a little frustrated over her friend. Despite Zhao Yueru having an excellent talent for virtual reality games, she showed no particular interest in them at all. Zhao Yueru also didn't like working. If she hadn't forcibly dragged Zhao Yueru to help her in Ouroboros, her friend would most likely remain jobless even until now and would be berated continuously by Uncle Zhao for being useless. Isn't this because virtual reality games are boring? All we do every day is fight and kill. How can that be better than enjoying delicacies every day? Zhao Yueru said, chuckling nonchalantly. It would be great if there's a game that lets you enjoy delicacies. That way, I can work while enjoying gourmet food every day. I also won't have to hear my old man nagging me to attend marriage meetings every day. Delicacies? A smile appeared on Gentle Snow's face when she heard Zhao Yueru's words. I recently heard that a new virtual reality game is going to launch soon. Although I don't know which company is developing this game, I heard that it has a powerful origin. Moreover, the game's realism rate reaches up to 99%, and the game world feels almost like the real world. You should be able to taste a lot of delicacies there. Really? Zhao Yueru shot up from her seat upon hearing Gentle Snow's words, her eyes glowing in excitement and anticipation as she looked at her friend. If she could taste good food in the virtual world, not only could she avoid her father's constant nagging, but she also wouldn't have to worry about growing fat from overeating. She would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It should be true. Seeing Zhao Yueru's sudden interest, Gentle Snow smiled and explained, although I don't know the exact details, I heard that many super guilds plan to shift their focus to this new game. Ouroboros is no exception as well. So, I believe this game shouldn't be bad. Are you going to abandon things in Dragon Demon War? Zhao Yueru asked in surprise. Gentle Snow had expended a lot of blood and sweat to develop Ouroboros in Dragon Demon War. It would be a huge waste for her to hand her work to another person. Dragon Demon War is only ranked within the top 30 of virtual reality games. Although it is quite popular, it is several leagues below the top 10 games. Moreover, this new game called God's Domain is something even the various super guilds have set their sights on. This is a good opportunity for me. In an earnest tone, Gentle Snow said, so long as I can achieve excellent merits in God's Domain, I believe none of those Grand Elders should have any more opinions of me. She hadn't overseen Ouroboros's operations in Dragon Demon War since the very beginning. Instead, she only joined after the guild had developed in the game for a few years. Hence, even if she achieved any merits in the game, these merits couldn't be linked to her entirely. However, it was a different story for God's Domain. Everyone would have a new start in the game. This would be the best stage for her to display her current abilities. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In that case, I've decided. I'll properly improve myself and clean up Cao Chenghua's henchmen, Zhao Yueru said eagerly. Once I do that, I'll see if that old man of mine still dares to call me useless. Seeing Zhao Yueru's declaration and fighting spirit, Gentle Snow couldn't help but sigh in relief. She had finally accomplished Uncle Zhao's request of her. Otherwise, at this rate, Uncle Zhao would most likely ask her to accompany Zhao Yueru in attending another marriage meeting. April 25, 2129. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Gentle Snow put on a set of white pajamas and laid down in her virtual gaming cabin. She then chose to log into God's domain. Chapter 2920. Chapter 2 SS2, Aqua Rose. 1. Windchime Town, Redthorn Bar. Windchime Town was the most populated town in the Storm Empire's western region. Despite the bar charging 10 copper coins even for its cheapest ale, which was a significant expenditure for current players, the bar would still be overcrowded every day. Currently, many of the bar's patrons had their eyes directed toward one corner of the bar. To be precise, they were looking at an alluring woman dressed in a lavender robe. With how many eyes focused on this woman, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the bar had to thank this woman for more than half of its customers. Many of the players who had just entered the bar, both male and female, would also inadvertently have their eyes drawn toward this woman. At this time, a brawny level 6 man fully clad in dark grey bronze equipment walked into the bar. When he saw the beautiful woman sitting in the corner and drinking by herself, he couldn't help but be thunderstruck. Who is that beauty? Not only has she reached level 7, but she even has a set of mysterious iron equipment. God's Domain had just launched recently, and the brawny man was one of the top-ranking experts of Windchime Town. Even then, he had only recently reached level 6, while most Windchime Town's experts were stuck at level 5 still. As for weapons and equipment, the average player would only have common equipment that didn't provide any attributes. If one could have several pieces of bronze equipment at this stage of the game, they would become a target for attention when they walked out on the street. If one owned a piece of mysterious iron equipment, they would instantly become the center of attention of any street or establishment they visited. As for having a complete set of mysterious iron equipment, that was something simply unimaginable. Brother Chen, I don't see a guild emblem on her. She might be an independent player. Why don't we invite her into our Ghostblade Adventurer team? A level 6 ranger youth following behind the brawny man suggested. At the youth's words, the other dozen or so men in the adventurer team nodded in agreement, their eager reactions earning them the contempt of the several female players in the adventurer team. However, despite their contempt for their team members, when these female players saw the beautiful woman seated at the corner, they similarly felt their hearts moved. Meanwhile, the brawny man standing in the group's lead also nodded in agreement with the youth's words. You're right. If we can get her to join our team, we should have an easier time clearing the hard mode of that level 5 team dungeon. When the brawny man finished speaking, the Ghost Blade members immediately grew excited. Their Ghost Blade Adventurer team was one of the top-ranking adventurer teams operating in Windchime Town. They were so powerful that they even dared go against large guilds. For this reason, many expert players sought to join them. However, as their adventurer team had strict requirements, only a small number of experts would ever get to join them. Meanwhile, their commander, Brother Chen, was one of Windchime Town's top 10 shield warriors. Anyone who joined their adventurer team would have a bright future. Now that they were taking the initiative to invite the lavender-clad woman, the latter should have no reason to refuse them. However, before Brother Chen could approach the beauty in question, another beautiful woman entered his eyes. This woman had snow-white hair and a mesmerizing appearance. She wore a dark blue robe and carried a secret silver staff made of white jade. Meanwhile, this person approached the lavender-clad woman and sat down beside her. After seeing this, Brother Chen halted his footsteps immediately, not daring to move even a step further. Noticing his frozen commander, the level 6 ranger youth asked, "Brother Chen, what's wrong?" "It's nothing," Brother Chen said as he shook his head. "Let's forget about inviting that beauty." "Why so, Brother Chen?" The ranger youth grew agitated. "Is our team's fame insufficient to recruit her? It would be tough for them to find such a beautiful expert again. If they put forth the name of their adventurer team now, the woman might very well agree to their invite. If that happened, he would have more opportunities to come into contact with this woman in the future. Yet, now, he was being told to give up on recruiting her. "Do you see that white-haired beauty?" Brother Chen said as he pointed at the woman who just sat down. In a frustrated tone, he continued, Now that she has already made her move, we won't have any chance. Why is that so? The ranger youth grew confused. He acknowledged that the white-haired woman indeed rivaled the lavender-clad woman in terms of appearance and figure. She also possessed amazing strength, her level having reached level 6 already. She even wielded a secret silver staff. However, the white-haired woman was an independent player as well. How could their Ghost Blade adventurer team possibly lose out to an independent player? She's that unyielding ice. Brother Chen said. Do you think we have any chances now? Unyielding ice. She's Wind Chime Town's #1 expert. The ranger youth was stunned. Logically, with God's Domain having launched only recently, there shouldn't be anyone capable of being recognized as a town's #1 expert. At most, powerful experts would be recognized as being part of the top 10 or 20 strongest players in a town. However, Unyielding Ice was different. She had made everyone in Wind Chime Town recognize her strength. With just the power of one person, she had killed over 100 experts a large guild had sent to hunt her. At this stage of the game, the differences in levels and equipment between players were tiny. Adding on the limitation of stamina, it was practically impossible for one player to kill over 100 players of the same level. Yet, someone in Wind Chime Town had carried out this feat. Due to this reason, Unyielding Ice's name became the biggest taboo in Wind Chime Town overnight. She was also recognized as the town's most terrifying existence. Brother Chen's eyes were filled with fear as he looked at Unyielding Ice, chatting and smiling in the distance. Patting the ranger youth on the shoulder, he advised, by the looks of it, those two should be friends. We'll only be making a fool of ourselves if we try to invite that beauty. It's best if you abandon those childish thoughts of yours. Those two women are living in a completely different world than us. If we offend that Unyielding Ice and make her unhappy, none of us should think of leaving Wind Chime Town's gate ever again. I understand, Brother Chen. The ranger youth acceded to Brother Chen's advice. However, he still couldn't help himself from looking at the great beauty seated beside Unyielding Ice, a hint of curiosity appearing in his eyes. Who is that person, though? She's having such a friendly chat with a cold killer like Unyielding Ice. Meanwhile, after Ghostblade's members abandoned their plan and found a seat far away from Unyielding Ice sent the group a glance. She then returned her gaze to the extraordinary beauty beside her and said frustratingly, Aqua, you sure know how to pick meeting locations. If I hadn't arrived ahead of time, that adventurer team would have been met with tragedy. Aqua Rose was the honorary elder of Twilight Echo, a first-rate guild. Setting aside her extraordinary personal strength, she could easily make sure that a measly adventurer team like Ghostblade disappear with her influence in the Storm Empire. I'm not that terrible. Aqua Rose rolled her eyes at Unyielding Ice. She then smiled and said, also, I would have never imagined that the girl famed for being gentle in our school would become Windchime City's famous cold killer. Now, even that well-known Dark Zone is afraid of you. If our classmates find out about this, they'll probably be given a scare. It's not my fault. They forced my hand. Anyway, let's not talk about me, Unyielding Ice said, a look of frustration appearing on her face as she took a sip of water from the glass the waiter had prepared for her. If possible, she wouldn't have wanted to kill all those people and become famous, either. However, the second-rate guild Dark Zone had targeted a treasure she acquired. If she hadn't gone all out to protect that treasure, it would be impossible for her to achieve success in God's Domain in the future. You could easily join a super guild with your strength, yet you chose to operate solo. It's only natural you'd get targeted by the various powers, Aqua Rose said. How about joining Twilight Echo? With my status in the guild, I promise you won't get dragged into any guild affair. You can continue operating alone as you are now. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm used to operating solo, Unyielding Ice said, shaking her head. She then put on a serious look and continued, what about you? How are you doing in Twilight Echo? From what I heard, Brilliant War God is sticking to you like a fly. I also heard that he has your family's full support, and even your maternal grandfather seems interested in him. I see you're still as well informed as ever. Aqua Rose's smile disappeared. Then, she slowly said, Brilliant War God's family isn't much of a problem since my family's sun and moon group isn't any weaker than his family's company. However, my maternal grandfather and the other elders of the family share deep ties with the elders of Brilliant War God's family. This is also the case for my father's generation. They're deliberately pushing this matter so that our two families can have a better future development. Looking at Aqua Rose's frustrated look, Unyielding Ice smiled and suggested, "Why don't you go independent and come with me? So long as we make some achievements, I doubt your parents will have any problems." No, I won't give up." Aqua Rose shook her head. With confidence, she said, "I'll show an amazing performance in Twilight Echo. Once I have greater authority in the guild, neither my parents nor maternal grandfather can say anything about my decisions anymore. Brilliant War God's side won't be able to do anything about it, either." "Very well, then. In that case, let's see which one of us will achieve our goals first," Unyielding Ice said, smiling. "I'll definitely be first. I've already established a powerful team. Give me some time, and I'm confident my team can stand shoulder to shoulder with the guild's main force," Aqua Rose said confidently. "All right, let's get back to the topic. Why did you call me here?" Unyielding Ice asked, not willing to continue arguing over this topic. After all, this wasn't the first time they had this discussion. The reunion meeting is approaching. You've been so busy recently that nobody was able to get in touch with you. So, our old class monitor asked me to notify and persuade you. Here's the invitation. Don't forget to attend, Aqua Rose said before forwarding an email to Unyielding Ice. Although they were currently in God's Domain's virtual world, it was possible to upload files into the game from the real world. The only problem was that the transfer of files had to be done face-to-face. "All right, I got it." Unyielding Ice nodded after she received the digital invitation letter. She then grabbed a black crystal out of her bag and said, "I'll give this thing to you. I don't have any use for it, but it should be of some help to you." Looking at the black crystal, Aqua Rose asked strangely, "What's this?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A teleportation token, something I got from killing a monster. You can use it to teleport to an NPC city called Blackwing City. I believe you can buy a lot of things from that place, Unyielding Ice explained. An NPC city? Many thoughts appeared in Aqua Rose's mind as she looked at the crystalline token. This is interesting. Thanks. No need for thanks between us. If you come into trouble, contact me anytime. I might not be able to help with big problems, but I can still help out with small problems, Unyielding Ice said with a smile. She then stood up and left the red thorn bar, leaving Aqua Rose alone with the crystalline token. The guild's elders meeting is in 3 days. Since I don't have anything better to do, let's take a look at this Blackwing City. Thinking up to this point, Aqua Rose settled the bill with 1 silver coin and left the bar as well. Chapter 29-21. Chapter 3 SS3, Fire Dance, 1, Bingquan City, Brawler Training Center. The Brawler Training Center was the most popular training center in Bingquan City, and more than 10,000 people visited the establishment each day. Not only did this place own the best training facilities available, but it also had excellent instructors. However, the main contributor to the training center's popularity would still be the small fighting competitions the training center held weekly. Moreover, it was even an indiscriminate fighting competition. When the referee gave his verdict, cheers filled the arena in the arena located on the 3rd floor hall. The champion of this week's competition had just been crowned. Moreover, to everyone's surprise, this week's champion was a young and beautiful woman. This young woman possessed attractive facial features and a sensual body that drew both men's and women's eyes. "Big Sis Fire Dance, you're amazing. There was a professional fighter participating in today's competition, yet you still beat him nonetheless. That person has even won the championship of the city's fighting competition before. With this, there is hardly anybody who can be a match in Bingquan City." A robust man, who was nearly 2 meters tall and looked to be in his late 20s, said as he looked at the young woman, who had just won the weekly competition, in admiration. When the robust man and young woman stood side by side, they also created a disharmonious scene for the surrounding people. Despite being larger and older than the young woman, The robust man behaved as if he was the woman's little brother. Water buffalo, how many times have I told you not to call me by my ID when we're outside? The woman named Firedance said, rolling her eyes. She then smiled faintly and continued, if you call me by my ID one more time, I'll let you experience the joy of that professional fighter as well. The stout man named Water Buffalo shivered when he recalled the sight of Firedance nearly breaking the professional fighter's leg. I won't do it anymore. I promise. I swear. Firedance might seem like an alluring and delicate beauty, but her combat power was on the level of monsters. Many of their current team members were professional fighters, a few even had some fame in their respective cities. However, Firedance had still beaten every one of them into submission. With his skills, Water Buffalo doubted he could last more than 5 moves. Out with it, Firedance said. Why did you suddenly come looking for me today? The raid members for the Dark Moon Graveyard have gathered, but someone in our team named Little Seven got targeted by a guild player and is currently being hunted, Water Buffalo said in frustration. I wanted to ask for your help, but you were so busy with the competition that I couldn't even contact you. So, I had no choice but to visit you in person. Does the other party have a powerful background? Firedance asked. She had played many virtual reality games before, so she knew how troublesome it would be to become hostile with a large guild. She had also experienced being hunted by a large guild to the point of having no choice but to retire from the game. Meanwhile, she liked the virtual reality game known as God's Domain very much. If this problem involved a large guild, she would have to be cautious in dealing with it. I heard that the other party is an elite member of Martial Union, Water Buffalo said. Got it. I'll go online as quickly as possible and head to the Dark Moon Graveyard with you. I want to see exactly how powerful this Martial Union is. Firedance nodded, an icy gleam flashing across her eyes. She had gone to great lengths to establish her current team. It was also her ambition to create a powerful team in God's domain. How could she possibly let other people humiliate her team at this stage of the game? Afterward, Firedance rushed back to her home, logged into God's domain via her virtual gaming helmet, and met up with Water Buffalo. Starmoon Kingdom, Dark Moon Graveyard. While Firedance and Water Buffalo were hurrying their way from Red Leaf Town to the Dark Moon Graveyard, they suddenly received 2 regional announcements. White River City Region System announcement. Congratulations to Ouroboros for becoming the first team to conquer the Hell mode of Dark Moon Graveyard. All players within the team will be rewarded with 10 reputation points in White River City. Red Leaf Town Region System announcement. Congratulations to Ouroboros for becoming the first team to conquer the Hell mode of Dark Moon Graveyard. All players within the team will be rewarded with 30 reputation points in Red Leaf Town. Someone cleared the Dark Moon Graveyard? Water Buffalo couldn't believe his eyes when he read the system announcements. How is this possible? The various guilds had only begun raiding the Dark Moon Graveyard recently. With the levels and equipment standard of the various guilds' main force, it should take them at least 5 days to even conquer the Dark Moon Graveyard's hard mode, let alone the dungeon's hell mode. Ouroboros. Firedance's eyes widened in shock as she read the system announcements. Is there such a huge gap between us? She had more or less heard of the guild Ouroboros. Unlike the unrated guilds operating in Red Leaf Town, Ouroboros was a bona fide first-rate guild. However, Firedance previously thought there wasn't much of a gap between herself and a first-rate guild. She had been extremely diligent in leveling up, and she had even reached level 6 already. At this stage of the game, she definitely ranked among the top echelon of players in Red Leaf Town. Meanwhile, according to the research she conducted on the Dark Moon Graveyard, let alone level 6, even level 10 players would have difficulty conquering the dungeon's hard mode. Needless to say, the dungeon's hell mode would be even more challenging. Originally, she had been confident that her team could clear the dungeon's normal mode within the next 3 days. Afterward, they would challenge the dungeon's hard mode and compete with the various guilds' teams. Now, however, her ambitions had become a complete joke. During the time Firedance and Water Buffalo were processing the shock brought by the regional announcement, they quickly met up with Little Seven, who had been hiding in the forest surrounding the Dark Moon Graveyard. Little Seven, are you all right? Fire Dance asked with concern as she looked at the delicate little girl in front of her. I'm fine, Big Sis Fire. I've been hiding inside this tree hole all this time, so they never managed to find me, Little Seven explained and nodded. They were close to finding me originally, but because of the recent system announcement, they suddenly began making their way to the dungeon. If not for that, I would have died for sure. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That's good. Water Buffalo sighed in relief. We don't have to fight with Martial Union now. Little Seven had only risen to level 6 recently. She even wielded a mysterious iron staff and wore several pieces of level 5 bronze equipment. She was their team's main firepower. If she got killed and lost one of her items, their plan of raiding the Dark Moon graveyard would have to be delayed. We won't let this matter slide. Since Martial Union dares target our team members, we'll need to make it pay. Fire Dance snarled. We'll head to the dungeon and see what they're up to. After saying so, Fire Dance entered stealth and dashed toward the Dark Moon graveyard's entrance. Seeing this, Water Buffalo couldn't help but sigh in frustration. After having Little Seven return to town, he followed after Fire Dance with haste. Chapter 29-22. Chapter 4 Star Moon Kingdom, Red Leaf Town. NPCs who behaved almost the same as real people crowded the streets of Red Leaf Town. Whether it was the environment or perception of players, everything in God's domain felt incredibly realistic. Anyone who entered this game would feel as if they had arrived in an actual alien world instead of a virtual world. If not for the system interface hovering in front of every player and the different icons hovering above the heads of players and NPCs, the world of God's domain would look no different than a real world in the eyes of players. This game is amazing. I thought the game's promotion was exaggerated, but this is simply incredible. I really wonder which company made this game, Zhao Yueru exclaimed. Zhao Yueru was currently sitting on the roof of a 3-story restaurant. As she observed the view beneath her, she couldn't help but be awed. She had played many virtual reality games before, but none of them came even close to matching God's Domain. The game known as God's Domain was many notches above even the best virtual reality game that currently existed. The food in this game was also different from other virtual reality games, which only offered basic flavors and nothing else. Eating food in God's Domain was akin to eating food in the real world. Everything from textures and flavors was replicated perfectly. In this game, eating food would no longer have to be for the sole purpose of replenishing one's in-game stamina or health. Instead, one could also eat for the sake of enjoyment. Of course, the precondition for enjoyment was that one ate food that was delicious. If one ate the black bread that was selling for only 2 copper coins per 5 loaves, rather than enjoyment, it would become torture instead. Yes, God's Domain is indeed incredible, Gentle Snow, who was currently geared in white plate armor and carrying a silver greatsword on her back, said, nodding in agreement. A hint of confusion flashing across her eyes, she continued, although I've previously looked into it, I still couldn't find out which company developed God's Domain. It's as if the game appeared out of thin air. Moreover, it even received the support and promotion of many major powers. Even the Green God Company is showing great interest in this game. What's even more amazing is the level of technology used in this game. It is several generations ahead of other virtual reality games in this regard, and it has even accomplished the impossible feat of accelerating time. When playing the standard virtual reality game, 1 hour spent in the game world was 1 hour spent in the real world. However, it was different for God's Domain. 2 hours spent in the game world was 1 hour spent in the real world. This functionality was simply unheard of. Isn't that great? Zhao Yueru couldn't help but smile when she saw the amazed look on Gentle Snow's face. We players get to enjoy double the pleasure in God's Domain. No, you don't understand the true meaning of this technology, Gentle Snow said, shaking her head. Initially, Gentle Snow believed that God's Domain would become a popular virtual reality game and eventually have a massive player base. She felt that it might even become one of the top 5 best-selling games in the world. However, her opinions changed after realizing that the game possessed the never-before-seen time dilation technology. With this technology implemented into the game, players could essentially double their expected lifespans by playing the game. Players could also double their work or study efficiency by bringing their work or studies to the world of God's domain. With this technology alone, God's domain could easily surpass any pre-existing virtual reality games. As icing on the cake, the degree of realism in God's domain was also unprecedented, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it a second world for human beings. At this point, Gentle Snow could already foresee that God's domain would become the sole virtual reality game in the world in a few months. This would deal a devastating blow to all virtual reality games currently on the market. It might even redefine virtual reality games completely. However, Zhao Yueru had no clue what her best friend was saying. She simply nodded every now and then while enjoying the blueberry pie in front of her. By the way, how is that recipe we got from Yifeng? Gentle Snow suddenly asked. Gentle Snow placed heavy importance on the basic strength potion recipe they got from Yifeng. After raiding the Hell Mode Deathly Forest, she had told Zhao Yueru to immediately hand it to one of the guild's alchemists for production. An increase in 6 points to strength might not seem like much, but it was a significant increase for players who were only at level 4 or level 5. After excluding the used ones, we currently have around 1,000 bottles stocked up. Thanks to these basic strength potions, we are making good progress in raiding level 4 and level 5 party dungeons. Currently, all of our elite members have at least 4 pieces of bronze equipment each. At this rate, I believe raiding the Dark Moon Graveyard shouldn't be a big problem, Zhao Yueru said in a slightly excited tone. We currently have a huge lead over the guild's elite teams located in other towns when it comes to levels and equipment. Many of the guild members from the neighboring towns are gradually making their way to Red Leaf Town. If this continues, the advantage we'll have when we enter White River City will grow bigger and bigger. Are the effects this great? Gentle Snow was a little surprised. Gentle Snow had been entirely focused on grinding and raiding dungeons recently, so she hadn't been paying much attention to guild affairs. She only tasked Zhao Yueru and Xiao Yue with managing the basic strength potions matter. However, Gentle Snow never thought that the basic strength potion recipe they got from Yifeng would have such astonishing effects. Gentle Snow couldn't help but admit that Yifeng's present was truly amazing. That's right. If not for this potion, I'm afraid we will have to delay our plans to raid the Dark Moon Graveyard by 1 or 2 days, Zhao Yueru said, nodding. I really don't know if Yifeng is lucky or very lucky. Our members have raided the Deathly Forest over a dozen times already, yet they haven't gotten even one extra basic strength potion recipe until now. Instead, all they got are a bunch of other recipes. I don't think that's a matter of luck. Yifeng might look ordinary, but he gives off an indescribably calm and confident feeling. I have seen many confident and prideful experts before, but his confidence gives me completely different vibes. It feels as if he has an excellent understanding of God's domain, and his movements in the dungeon make it seem as if he had raided it many times before, Gentle Snow said, shaking her head. She remembered the expression Shifeng made when their party had conquered the Deathly Forest. There was no joy in his expression. Instead, he reacted as if their success was an inevitable outcome, and this was a bizarre reaction. It should be known that the Deathly Forest was Red Leaf Town's first-party dungeon. The achievement of being the first party to clear the dungeon held extraordinary significance. Even a beta tester of the game should feel excited over such an achievement. After all, the Deathly Forest's parameters should have been altered after the game's official launch. This was especially true for the boss's statistics and attack patterns. However, Shifeng's reaction to their success was indescribably bland. He looked as if he was a veteran carrying a party of newcomers. Snow, you think too highly of him. He's only relying on the fact that he's a beta tester to behave that way. However, the beta test doesn't have team dungeons. Everyone will have the same starting point when it comes to team dungeons, Zhao Yueru said nonchalantly. If he has even half of Black Flame's abilities, I'll bow down in deference to him. Zhao Yueru held great admiration toward the person known as Black Flame. The man had made a fortune through the glimmer chestplate he created. The amount of money he had earned was something even first-rate guilds like Ouroboros envied. Most importantly, he could produce level 10 mysterious iron equipment. With this kind of ability, Black Flame was more than capable of influencing an entire guild. Even a first-rate guild like Ouroboros desperately sought to partner with him. Relying on his status as a beta tester, is it? Gentle Snow mumbled. However, although she felt that Zhao Yueru's words sounded reasonable, her intuition told her that Shifeng wasn't as simple as he appeared. While Gentle Snow and Zhao Yueru talked about Shifeng, a girl dressed in an exquisite white robe suddenly approached them. This person was none other than Xiao Yue, one of Gentle Snow's close confidants. In an anxious tone, Xiao Yue said, "Big Sis Snow, something big happened." I don't know what Cao Chenghua said, but the Grand Elders suddenly decided to hold an executive meeting. They plan to decide on the next guild leader during this meeting. Currently, all of the guild's elders and Grand Elders have already reached the meeting venue, and we're the only ones absent. So soon? Zhao Yueru was stunned when she heard this news. Ouroboros currently still lacked a guild leader. And because of this problem, numerous arguments had occurred between Gentle Snow and Cao Chenghua. As their two sides possessed significant influence in the guild elders could never decide who should become the next guild leader. Originally, the plan was to wait for another year and a half for both guild leader candidates to display their abilities before deciding who would succeed the guild leader position. Either that or if one of the candidates managed to make a significant achievement in God's domain. Currently, it had only been a few days since God's domain launched, yet the guild's elders and Grand Elders already planned to choose the next guild leader. This was simply too soon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I understand. We'll log off and head over immediately, Gentle Snow said after pondering over the matter. She then looked at Xiao Yue and said, "Get the glimmer chestplates matter settled as soon as possible." Gentle Snow was certain Cao Chenghua had made plenty of preparations now that he had persuaded the Grand Elders to host such an impromptu meeting. If that were the case, what came next would be a comparison to see who had the bigger fist in God's domain. "I'll go get it done right away." Xiao Yue hurriedly left the restaurant and made her way to the Forging Association immediately. Meanwhile, after Gentle Snow and Zhao Yueru paid the bill for their meal, they logged out of the game and made their way to Ouroboros's top-floor meeting room. Chapter 2923-SS5, Gentle Snow, 3. SS5, Gentle Snow, 3, Ouroboros's headquarters, top-floor meeting room. Several dozen Ouroboros executives were currently gathered inside the basketball court-size meeting room. These people were either the branch managers of an area or elders of the guild. Meanwhile, the guild's 5 Grand Elders and Vice Guild leaders were seated at the head of the table. As the meeting had yet to begin, the branch managers and guild elders were having private discussions with each other. What's going on? Why did even the 5 Grand Elders show up? Is it because of God's domain? It must be. God's domain is too popular. Right now, it has already become the most popular game in the world. I even heard that some major corporations are investing in this game. So, if our guild wants to take a step further in the virtual gaming industry, God's domain will be the best place to do so. But from what I heard, it seems the discussion topic this time isn't just limited to how we should tackle God's domain. It seems we will also be discussing who will succeed the guild leader position. That's natural. The guild leader position has been vacant for a long time already, and the 2 vice guild leaders have been responsible for managing the guild all this time. It sounds like a joke when you mention it to others. Everyone present was aware that something big would happen in today's meeting. Not to mention, it was already common knowledge that Cao Chenghua was greedily vying to become Ouroboros's guild leader. However, recently, Gentle Snow, the guild leader's younger sister, had also been showing excellent performance. She had helped the guild develop significantly. She had even helped the guild garner a lot of sponsors and advertising fees. At this point, Gentle Snow had already become Ouroboros's label, and many players had joined the guild because of Gentle Snow. Even so, Cao Chenghua wasn't a pushover. The achievements he had accomplished were not the slightest bit inferior to Gentle Snow's. He also had the majority support from the various corporations sponsoring Ouroboros. Most importantly, many of the guild's older generation experts were standing on Cao Chenghua's side. Meanwhile, expert players held a very crucial position in a guild. A guild needed the support of expert players. Certain guild affairs couldn't be completed with just one or two expert players, but many instead. Because of this reason, the guild's Grand Elders had a much more favorable opinion of Cao Chenghua compared to Gentle Snow. After the private discussions in the room continued for some time, a lithe and beautiful figure walked into the room. "You're finally here." When the tall and robust man seated at the head of the meeting table saw Gentle Snow entering, a hint of mockery appeared in his eyes as he said, "You've certainly made us wait." The man had spoken in a loud voice, so everyone in the room heard him. However, nobody present dared stand out to refute him. This was because this tall man was Blackheart Arrow, who was also a vice-guild leader of Ouroboros like Gentle Snow. Zhao Yueru, who followed after Gentle Snow, glared at Blackheart Arrow when she heard the other party's words. They were the last to be notified about this sudden meeting. Everyone else had been informed about it half an hour earlier. If not for Xiao Yue acting quickly, they would have arrived at an even later time. Just as Zhao Yueru was about to say something more, Gentle Snow held out a hand and stopped her friend. Then, she gazed in Blackheart Arrow and calmly said, "Sorry for being late." Blackheart Arrow chuckled. Then, in a condescending tone, he said, "Now that's more like it. You are one of the guild's vice-guild leaders and the previous guild leader's younger sister. You might become your elder brother's successor in the future. If you can't lead by example, how will the guild continue operating in the future?" Many of the guild elders and branch managers present couldn't help but nod in agreement. When the former guild leader was still around, he had always been a role model for everyone. Because of this, Ouroboros was able to become a publicly acknowledged first-rate guild in the virtual gaming industry. If not for that accident, Ouroboros would have been more prosperous than it was now. "All right, hurry up and take a seat, Vice Guild Leader Qingxue. We have something very important to discuss in today's meeting," Cao Chenghua, who sat beside Blackheart Arrow, said as he sent a glance at Gentle Snow. In response, Gentle Snow nodded and sat down on one of the main seats. Meanwhile, Zhao Yueru sat beside her with a frustrated expression on her face. Zhao Yueru couldn't understand why Gentle Snow would allow Blackheart Arrow to question her authority and let everyone in the guild look down on her. However, Zhao Yueru also failed to notice that Blackheart Arrow's smile actually held a hint of anger because his plans to further escalate the matter had failed. "Since everyone is here, let's begin today's meeting," Cao Chenghua said, taking charge of the meeting. Then, putting on a faint smile, he continued, "I know everyone has many questions regarding the sudden meeting today. First and foremost, I would like to express my apologies for interrupting any prior arrangements you've made. Vice Guild Leader Cao, no need to humble yourself like that. Since the guild has an important affair, it is only natural for us to answer its call immediately," Blackheart Arrow said, chuckling. Then, he sent a glance at Gentle Snow and Zhao Yueru and flatly stated, "We're not like some people who would dismiss the guild's affairs because of some private matters." Upon hearing Blackheart Arrow's words, many of the executives present nodded in agreement. "All right, then. In that case, I won't waste time with words. I've invited everyone here today for two matters," Cao Chenghua said when he saw that he had received the crowd's support. "The first matter is a suggestion. I suggest that from this moment onward, we halt all affairs in other games and focus all of our manpower on God's domain. I have information relating to God's domain here. It also records the series of actions taken by the various super first-rate guilds and super guilds." After saying so, Cao Chenghua had his secretary pass a document to everyone present. The document recorded in detail the actions of the virtual gaming industry's various superpowers. As everyone can see, ever since God's Domain's launch, every other virtual reality game has been seeing a rapid decline. Now, the various superpowers have even begun gradually shifting all of their focus to God's Domain. Therefore, if Ouroboros wishes to avoid getting eliminated and take a step further, we will also have to shift our strength to God's domain. Otherwise, we won't even have the strength to establish ourselves in God's domain. Cao Chenghua's information was incredibly detailed, and everyone couldn't help but be dumbfounded by what they saw. According to the report, God's domain's development was simply astounding. Now, Just the number of players playing God's Domain had already exceeded the total number of players playing every other virtual reality game. At this growth rate, even a fool could tell that God's Domain would reign supreme in the virtual gaming industry in the future. Yes, it seems we have to focus our strength in God's Domain. The various superpowers have a significant advantage over us in terms of manpower and foundations. If we don't move quickly, we might not even be able to establish a foothold in the future. When the Grand Elders finished reading the report, all 5 expressed strong support toward Cao Chenghua's suggestion. As for the other people present, none of them voiced any objections, either. Some of the branch managers who hadn't started developing in God's Domain couldn't help but wish they could enter God's Domain and start leveling up immediately. Since there are no objections, Ouroboros will begin tackling God's Domain in full force from today onward. I hope everyone can make the necessary preparations as soon as possible, Cao Chenghua said, a happy smile appearing on his face when he saw everyone's unanimous agreement to his suggestion. Now, for the second matter. Since Ouroboros is now fully invested in God's Domain, we cannot delay the matter of deciding the guild leader any longer. After all, a guild without a guild leader will face many problems when executing important tasks. It will also be impossible to unite the guild's strength. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU indeed. It might be fine during other times, but we are at a juncture that will decide the guild's future, Blackheart Darrow said. If the guild doesn't have a guild leader to preside over the general situation, all talks about succeeding in God's Domain is futile. So, I suggest that Vice Guild Leader Cao takes over the guild leader position. After all, Vice Guild Leader Cao has already laid significant foundations for the guild in God's Domain. He has even attracted the sponsorship of several corporations recently. I believe Ouroboros will be able to quickly set up shop in God's Domain with Vice Guild Leader Cao leading us. At Blackheart Arrow's words, the executives supporting Cao Chenghua promptly raised their hands in agreement. As for the neutral executives and Grand Elders, their eyes briefly glowed when they heard Blackheart Arrow's words. Although Ouroboros currently had ample funding, if the guild could acquire more funds, it would be able to further increase its strength. After all, establishing a foundation in a new game was incredibly important. The more investments a guild made during the early game, the easier of a time it would have when developing in the future. When Cao Chenghua saw that over half of the people present had sided with him, his lips curled into a smile. Meanwhile, Blackheart Arrow looked toward Gentle Snow and delightedly asked, "May I know what is your opinion on this matter, Vice Guild Leader Qingxue?" Chapter 2924_SS6, Gentle Snow, 4. SS6, Gentle Snow, 4. As soon as Blackheart Arrow spoke, the branch managers present couldn't help but look at Gentle Snow sympathetically. They also couldn't help but admit that Cao Chenghua had made a decisive move. Not only did Cao Chenghua come to this meeting with ample preparations, but he had even bought the full support of Blackheart Arrow, the guild's third vice-guild leader. In addition, half of the guild's executives agreed with Cao Chenghua's suggestion. In such a situation, how could Gentle Snow, who lacked the support of investors, possibly compete against Cao Chenghua? At this time, one of the Grand Elders looked at Gentle Snow and sighed. Then, he said, "Qingxue, we know that today's meeting is quite sudden. We also know the contributions you've made to the guild. But for the sake of the guild's future development in God's Domain, we need to have a guild leader to oversee the guild's affairs. Also, the matter this time relates to the guild's continued existence. If we can secure the investments of several more corporations, Ouroboros will stand a greater chance in God's Domain." As soon as this Grand Elder finished speaking, the other Grand Elders present also nodded in agreement. Before the advent of God's Domain, they wouldn't have minded letting Gentle Snow and Cao Chenghua continue fighting over the position of guild leader. However, the guild was currently stuck at a crossroads, and it was of utmost importance that the guild had a guild leader. Meanwhile, the one most suitable for this position would naturally be the person capable of bringing the guild to greater heights. And while it was indeed true that the previous guild leader had said to give his little sister 4 years to prove her eligibility to become Ouroboros's next guild leader, that decision was inappropriate for the guild's current circumstances. After scanning the faces of the Grand Elders, Gentle Snow fully understood that the 5 Grand Elders were greatly tempted by the potential investors Cao Chenghua could bring. So, she said, I understand. It's good that you understand. After all, times have changed already. So long as Ouroboros has a guild leader, we can surely surpass the other first-rate guilds in God's domain, the Grand Elder said, nodding. However, in the next moment, Gentle Snow added, I had originally prepared over 1,000 basic strength potions and over 300 bronze weapons and equipment for the guild, but now it seems that won't be necessary. Over 1,000 basic strength potions and 300 bronze weapons and equipment. The management personnel responsible for God's domain couldn't help but perk up their ears and look at Gentle Snow when they heard her words. To people who had never played God's domain before, they would most likely think nothing of basic strength potions and bronze weapons and equipment. However, for those who had played God's domain, they would know that let alone bronze weapons and equipment, even common weapons and equipment were incredibly difficult to acquire at this stage of the game. This was because God's domain's drop rate for weapons and equipment was absurdly low. The drop rate was so terrible that any common weapon or equipment that got into the market would get sold instantly. As for bronze weapons and equipment, these were items all guilds were eyeing desperately. Meanwhile, an arsenal of 300+ bronze weapons and equipment would be more than enough to form 5 20-man elite teams, and these teams could start raiding team dungeons right away. As for the basic strength potion, many people present had also heard of this item before. This was because it was an item players could obtain through obtaining treasure chests found near the various towns. When consumed, this potion provided players with a 6-point increase to the strength attribute. Thus, it was the perfect item for exploring high-level areas and raiding challenging dungeons. However, as the basic strength potion's drop rate was abysmally low, every bottle was sold on the market for astronomical prices. A supply of 1,000 basic strength potions would be more than enough to let Ouroboros's vanguard teams sweep through team dungeons several dozen times. If Ouroboros could have Gentle Snow's mentioned supply of basic strength potions and bronze equipment, the guild could surpass the other first-rate guilds by a large margin. This was especially true when it came to raiding team dungeons. At this time, Cao Chenghua and Blackheart Arrow were also in disbelief as they looked at Gentle Snow. It should be known that Gentle Snow didn't have a lot of personnel on her side. With the numbers she had, it would be fortunate if she could even secure enough equipment for her subordinates. It should have been impossible for her to acquire so many additional basic strength potions and bronze equipment. Over 1,000 basic strength potions and 300 bronze weapons and equipment. Blackheart Arrow sneered as he looked at Gentle Snow. Vice Guild Leader Qingxue, I know you're dissatisfied over this matter, but it's not good to make baseless claims. If you say you have 1,000 basic strength potions and 300 bronze weapons and equipment, I can just as easily say that I have 2,000 basic strength potions and 600 bronze weapons and equipment. I knew you people wouldn't be convinced. Zhao Yueru couldn't help but smile upon hearing Blackheart Arrow's words. Immediately, she pulled out a set of data from her quantum watch and transferred it into the meeting table's computer. As soon as she did so, the table's projector displayed many images relating to God's domain. The images shown were photos of Gentle Snow's private warehouse, and inside her private warehouse lay a large number of common and bronze weapons and equipment. There were also piles of basic strength potions sitting in the warehouse. Well, we've shown our evidence now, so where's yours? You bunch joined God's domain the same time as we did, so what achievements have you made so far? It was only because of their possession of the basic strength potions recipes that their faction's members could effortlessly raid party dungeons and achieve the current results they had. Zhao Yueru refused to believe that Cao Chenghua and company were also capable of securing a limitless supply of basic strength potions. Impossible. Blackheart Arrow was dumbfounded when he saw the displayed images. He and Cao Chenghua had been playing God's domain since the game launched, yet even until now, their faction could barely secure enough equipment to gear a 20-man team. Yet, even though Gentle Snow had far fewer players on her side, her faction had acquired enough equipment to gear 10 20-man teams. How could anyone possibly believe this? This is still nothing. We'll even be acquiring a large batch of level 10 mysterious iron plate armor sometime later, Zhao Yueru said, feeling indescribably pleased when she saw the astonished look on everyone's faces. Once we equip the MTS of our 20-man teams with that plate armor, we'll have an even easier time raiding team dungeons. Though, looking at it now, it seems Qingshue's abilities are limited, so we'll leave the guild's preparation for raiding team dungeons to Vice Guild Leader Cao. After all, Vice Guild Leader Cao is very competent. I'm sure he won't have any problems handling such a small matter. As soon as Zhao Yueru finished speaking, Cao Chenghua's complexion turned ashen. Many of the guild elders present also revealed complicated expressions. Cao Chenghua was indeed capable of bringing more investors to the guild, which was something crucial for the guild's development. However, the weapons, equipment, and potions in Gentle Snow's possession were equally important. After all, so long as Ouroboros had these items, the guild could surpass the other first-rate guilds in God's domain. If Ouroboros could secure the first clear of multiple team dungeons, it would be highly beneficial toward raising the guild's reputation. Meanwhile, the benefits the guild could reap from gaining such a reputation would be significantly greater than the benefits money could bring. At this time, one of the elders on Cao Chenghua's side smiled and said, "Yueru, don't say that. We never denied Qingshue's ability. We were just having a discussion on the guild leader's position." "That's right. We were just discussing. See, we haven't decided who will become the next guild leader yet, right?" The other guild elders and branch managers also started speaking out one after another, making it look like the support they previously showed for Cao Chenghua had never happened. Seeing this, the 5 grand elders couldn't help but be dumbfounded. What was up with these people? Why did they suddenly start fawning over Gentle Snow one after another? No, Qingshue's abilities are too lacking to succeed the position of guild leader, Zhao Yueru said, shaking her head. As for these weapons, equipment, and basic strength potion, we'll keep them for ourselves. Everyone here can look for Vice Guild Leader Cao if you're interested in acquiring some for yourselves. The elders and branch managers responsible for the guild's affairs in God's domain couldn't help but be frustrated at Zhao Yueru's refusal to budge. However, the basic strength potions and bronze weapons and equipment were also too tempting for them to give up. Grand Elders, I propose we let Vice Guild Leader Qingxue become the guild leader. Vice Guild Leader Qingxue is already so capable despite being so young. The ex-guild leader has also appointed her as the acting guild leader. She couldn't be more suitable for the position. An elder, who had succumbed to the temptation of items, said in a righteous tone. That's right. I've long since known that Vice Guild Leader Qingxue wouldn't disappoint us. I, too, recommend we let Vice Guild Leader Qingxue become the next guild leader, an older guild elder said with a gratified expression. When Cao Chenghua and Blackheart Arrow saw that more than half of the guild's executives had switched to Gentle Snow's side, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. They were especially confounded by the actions of the several guild elders that had suggested for Gentle Snow to become the next guild leader. These people had been saying that Gentle Snow was unsuitable for the position just a few minutes ago. Yet, now, they were standing on Gentle Snow's side. Meanwhile, when the several grand elders saw this situation, they couldn't help but suspect that the guild's executives had lost their mind. Since when did these people support Gentle Snow so strongly? Had they been in support of Gentle Snow all this time, there wouldn't have been any point in holding a competition for the guild leader position in the first place. After pondering for a moment, the leading Grand Elder helplessly shook his head and said, since everyone can't make up their minds right now, we'll temporarily set aside the decision to choose a guild leader. However, it still doesn't change the fact that Ouroboros will now be fully invested in God's domain, so head back and make the necessary preparation. After the Grand Elder finished speaking, the meeting also came to an end. And as soon as the meeting was over, many of the guild executives present ran to Gentle Snow's side, every one of them hoping to receive some support from Gentle Snow. Consider yourself lucky. But don't think this matter will end like this, Cao Chenghua said, sending Gentle Snow a glare before leaving the meeting room. Meanwhile, after the meeting, Gentle Snow and Zhao Yueru returned to their shared bedroom in the guild headquarters. Zhao Yueru also couldn't help but cheer in delight when she recalled Cao Chenghua's unsightly defeat today. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Yueru, it's not time for celebrations yet, Gentle Snow said as she looked at the delight on her friend's face. Then, she revealed a bitter smile and continued, Cao Chenghua has plenty of financial support, so he will develop rapidly in God's domain. We will have to accelerate our progress if we want to continue beating him. You're right. Zhao Yueru nodded. Go get ready. We'll need to make some achievements in tomorrow's Dark Moon Graveyard raid, Gentle Snow said with a solemn look on her face. Initially, Gentle Snow thought that she still had some buffer time. However, now that Cao Chenghua's faction had secured significant financial support, her faction would need to secure the first clear of a team dungeon at the very least. Otherwise, with the manpower under her command, there was no way she could compete against Cao Chenghua in God's domain. Afterward, Gentle Snow and Zhao Yueru logged into God's domain once more. Chapter 2925-SS7, Fire Dance, 2. SS7, Fire Dance, 2, in a certain forest path located near the Dark Moon Graveyard. Fire Dance frenziedly charged toward the forest center after entering stealth. Meanwhile, Water Buffalo closely followed after her. As they moved closer and closer to the Dark Moon Graveyard, located at the forest center, Water Buffalo grew more and more frightened. Martial Union was but an unrated guild. Logically, the guild shouldn't have too many of its members gathered in a place like Red Leaf Town during the beginning stages of the game. However, the number of Martial Union members they came across only continued to increase as they moved closer to the Dark Moon Graveyard. Initially, they only counted a handful of Martial Union members. After some time, that number had increased to several dozen. Moreover, these players were all relatively geared, with some of them even having up to 3 pieces of bronze equipment. When they arrived at the Dark Moon Graveyard's entrance, the Martial Union members they counted had already exceeded 100. Seeing this, Water Buffalo couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. He was terrified that Fire Dance would impulsively pick a fight with Martial Union's members. If that happened, they would be all but dead meat. When Water Buffalo was about to walk out of the forest, Fire Dance, clad in dark red leather armor, suddenly appeared before him. Currently, she stood beside a large tree, quietly observing the distant Martial Union members' every action. Big Sis Fire. Water Buffalo anxiously called out to Fire Dance when he saw the eager look on her face. Don't tell me you're planning on taking action. Water Buffalo had a good understanding of Fire Dance, so he knew she was incredibly protective of her companions. Now that Martial Union's members had targeted Little Seven, Fire Dance would definitely try to teach them a lesson. The next moment, Fire Dance turned around and rolled her eyes at Water Buffalo. Then, she said, "Do you think of me as a fool? Can't you see how many experts they have here?" Water Buffalo sighed in relief when he heard Fire Dance's words. Though, it seems that these people from Martial Union are planning on taking action against Ouroboros's members that just came out of the dungeon, Fire Dance said as she looked at the 20-man team Martial Union's members currently surrounded. Then, narrowing her eyes, she continued, "If they start fighting, do you think those 20 players will agree if we offer them our help in exchange for a secret silver equipment from the Dark Moon Graveyard?" The 20 players Martial Union's members currently surrounded all possessed blindingly excellent equipment. Every one of them had more than one piece of mysterious iron equipment, something that was incredibly rare in Red Leaf Town. A few of them even had secret silver equipment. This group was definitely unique in Red Leaf Town. When Water Buffalo took a look at the team of 20, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat as he said, "I think that's going to be difficult. That beauty standing in the front is Gentle Snow, one of Ouroboros's vice guild leaders. That's a bona fide first-rate guild's vice guild leader we're talking about. If we try to take advantage of their predicament, I'm afraid we'll have trouble mingling in Red Leaf Town in the future. Grow a pair, will you?" Fire Dance said as he looked at Water Buffalo in contempt. "I'm offering to save them here. Is it too much to ask for just one secret silver equipment as compensation?" Fire Dance was wholly confident in her own skills. While she couldn't face multiple level 5 experts in a frontal confrontation simultaneously, she could distract and kill at least a dozen of Martial Union's members by herself if she relied on guerrilla warfare. If she included Water Buffalo's assistance, The two of them should have no problems dealing with 20 Martial Union members. Among Martial Union's members, the only person who could be considered a threat would be Ironsword Lion. If it was a one-on-one fight, Fire Dance had a high chance of beating him. However, if Ironsword Lion had the help of even one level 5 expert, then she would have no choice but to flee. Meanwhile, during the time Fire Dance was pondering how she could extort a piece of secret silver equipment from Ouroboros, Martial Union's Ironsword Lion suddenly let loose an angry roar. Immediately afterward, every one of Martial Union's members in the area charged toward Ouroboros's 20-man team. What? They're taking action already? My secret silver equipment. Fire Dance panicked a little when she saw that both guilds had started clashing already. Secret silver equipment was the highest quality equipment players could acquire at this stage of the game. So long as she could get her hands on a piece, it would substantially increase her basic attributes and boost her leveling efficiency by a large margin. However, shortly after the clash between Martial Union and Ouroboros began, Fire Dance and Water Buffalo couldn't help but be dumbfounded by what they saw. Logically, Martial Union, which had an absolute superiority in numbers, should have had the upper hand in this fight. However, in reality, what happened was the exact opposite as Ouroboros's 20-man team cut apart Martial Union's members as if they were chopping vegetables. Zhao Yueru, the woman clad in red robes, especially stood out. Just one of her fireballs could take away half of a shield warrior's HP. And whenever she cast an AoE spell, she would claim the lives of several players. Equally as astonishing was Gentle Snow. Clad in silver armor, she looked like a goddess of war as she brandished her great sword on the battlefield and claimed the head of an enemy player with her every swing. On the occasions she executed Whirlwind Slash, a large group of Martial Union members would fall simultaneously. None of Martial Union's members could put up any resistance against her. After witnessing the performance of Ouroboros's members, Water Buffalo gulped nervously and looked at Fire Dance. Big Sis Fire, you're not really going to try and extort a secret silver equipment from them, right? Although he had long since heard of Gentle Snow, he didn't think she was so powerful as to kill level 5 experts as if she was cutting up vegetables. If they were to try and extort a piece of secret silver equipment from the Snow Goddess, they would probably not live to see the sun tomorrow. What are you talking about? What secret silver equipment? While looking at the dead Martial Union members laying around Gentle Snow, Fire Dance pretended to be calm and said, I only said that their secret silver equipment looked good and that it would be great if I can own a piece as well. You best not cause them to misunderstand. I am a very upright assassin. Water Buffalo, while Gentle Snow and Ouroboros's other members were slaughtering Martial Union's members, a person of average height suddenly charged into Martial Union's rear line. Then, this person started slaughtering Martial Union's healers. In the blink of an eye, every one of Martial Union's dozen or so healers had fallen. Seeing this, Ironsword Lion let loose an angry bellow and charged at that person with his greatsword wielded. However, the next moment, another shocking scene occurred. The mysterious assailant had repulsed Ironsword Lion's greatsword with one of his one-handed swords with just a simple movement. Then, this person appeared behind Ironsword Lion and began brandishing his two swords, instantly sending 8 sword images cutting at Ironsword Lion. Although Ironsword Lion had reacted quickly, he only managed to block 6 of the sword images and ended up losing more than half of his HP to the remaining 2 attacks. From just this single exchange, the difference between both sides was as clear as day. Realizing that he was at a disadvantage, Ironsword Lion promptly turned around and fled after downing a regeneration potion. However, before he could get anywhere, 3 gleaming slashes claimed the rest of his HP. Just like that, in less than 3 seconds, one of Red Leaf Town's top experts had died. Crap! Who is that guy? That's Ironsword Lion we're talking about. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Water Buffalo nearly had his eyes fall out of his sockets when he saw Ironsword Lion dying. Ironsword Lion was one of Martial Union's executives. His combat power was not much inferior compared to Fire Dance. The fact that the mysterious assailant had managed to kill Ironsword Lion so effortlessly meant that he could also do the same for Fire Dance. However, God's Domain had only launched recently. Therefore, There should hardly be any difference in basic attributes between expert players. Let alone killing someone in 2 moves, an expert would be amazing if they could even kill another expert within a dozen moves. Meanwhile, shock also filled Fire Dance's heart as she watched the mysterious assailant collect the equipment Iron's word Lion dropped. Yi Feng, is it? Chapter 2926-SS8, Aqua Rose, 2. SS8, Aqua Rose, 2, Blackwing City, Business District. God's Domain had only launched recently, so the teleportation array for NPC cities hadn't even been activated yet. When Aqua Rose arrived in Blackwing City, she was deeply astounded by the city's majesty and prosperity. Not only did tall buildings cover the city, but the number of NPCs roaming the streets also far exceeded that of any town Aqua Rose had visited before. Moreover, these NPCs were even capable of conversing with each other and expressing emotions. If it weren't for the NPC symbol hovering above their heads, she would have mistakenly assumed that this place was a real world instead of a virtual world. Blackwing City's business district dazzled Aqua Rose especially. Unlike in the various NPC towns, players were prohibited from setting up street stalls in Blackwing City. If one wished to sell their items, one would have to do so through the auction house or own a shop. The scale of trade between Blackwing City and NPC towns was utterly different. I really have to thank Ice this time. As Aqua Rose observed the shops around her, she started mentally strategizing the actions she needed to take once she reached level 10 and gained access to NPC cities. If other NPC cities followed Blackwing City's business model, shops would undoubtedly become the target of contention for guilds in the future. The shops located in the various cities' main streets would be especially invaluable. If she could take proper advantage of the knowledge she just gained, it would definitely allow her to surpass her rivals once players started making their way into NPC cities. While collecting all sorts of information on NPC cities, Aqua Rose also inspected the various items Blackwing City had to offer, and she couldn't help but be shocked by what she saw. Unlike NPC towns, the variety and quality of items Blackwing City sold were many times superior. There was even a magic shop that sold magic scrolls unavailable in NPC towns. However, what shocked Aqua Rose even more was the actions of a cloaked man. Aqua Rose had encountered this cloaked man in the Blackwing auction house, and he had spent over 50 gold on a measly skill book. The degree of his wealth was so astonishing that even Aqua Rose, the honorary elder of a first-rate guild, couldn't help but be in awe. Moreover, after further observation, Aqua Rose found that this man was an independent player. He wasn't affiliated with any guild. It should be known that she carried only 15 gold coins on her person, and this was the result of after taking additional funds from the branch guild she oversaw. Had she not done so, she wouldn't even have 3 gold coins right now. Meanwhile, after further investigating this cloaked man, Aqua Rose couldn't help but be given a fright. Starmoon Kingdom's chief forger, Black Flame. Not only was this man the pioneer of a piece of bronze equipment's design, but he was even the manufacturer of the secret silver weapon Silver Dawn. Aqua Rose always believed that it was to her benefit to befriend capable people. This was especially true if the other party was a master capable of producing secret silver rank items. In the Storm Empire, talents of such caliber probably did not exceed a handful. So, Aqua Rose gritted her teeth and decided to treat this master to a meal, which ended up costing her more than 30 silver coins. Although she found this price to be heart-wrenching, she had no choice but to pretend like it didn't faze her. Fortunately, Aqua Rose's self-proclaimed superb acting skills did not fail her, and she successfully avoided making a fool of herself in front of Black Flame. On the contrary, the other party appeared very interested in her. She even succeeded in acquiring a business deal that even the first-rate guild Bloodthirsty Wargod had failed to acquire. As icing on the cake, this was a deal that was highly beneficial to her, as she only needed to pay 10 gold coins to acquire 500 glimmer chestplate designs. Although Aqua Rose also had to pay 17.88 million credits on the spot and an additional 65 gold coins within the following month, she still deemed this transaction to be the most successful business deal she had ever made in her life. Let's see what my old man has to say now. After sending off Black Flame, Aqua Aqua Rose couldn't help but laugh in glee as she looked at the glimmer chestplate designs in her bag. The glimmer chestplate's production was simple and cheap. In the current era where bronze equipment was still relatively rare, the glimmer chestplate design was definitely an object of contention for the various powers. If she were to sell these designs in the Storm Empire's various towns, she was confident she could earn several thousand gold coins without trouble. This was a sum of money that even super guilds had trouble acquiring. Needless to say, Twilight Echo could benefit substantially from having such a large sum of money. Bidi City, Restaurant Brilliance. Aqua Rose stepped out of a maglev car parked in front of the restaurant. Clad in a white dress, she looked like a fairy as she walked toward the restaurant entrance. The moment she stepped into the restaurant, the bustling establishment instantly fell silent. Whether it was the young men and women here to attend their class reunion or the restaurant's other guests, everyone found themselves inadvertently turning to stare at Aqua Rose. They were all deeply attracted by Aqua Rose's appearance and temperament. After entering the restaurant, Aqua Rose approached a woman standing by the door. Unlike Aqua Rose, though, this other woman wore a light blue t-shirt and shorts. She also covered most of her face with a jet black baseball cap. Upon reaching this other woman, Aqua Rose extended her arms and embraced her from behind without hesitation, giving the other party a scare. "Xiang, did you get fatter?" Aqua Rose asked as she pinched the other woman's willowy waist, her voice filled with serious concern. Upon seeing this scene, everyone in the restaurant couldn't help but salivate. This was because everyone just realized that the woman in the light blue t-shirt was actually a beauty comparable to Aqua Rose. The only reason they failed to notice her beauty before was because of the baseball cap she wore. However, after Aqua Rose bumped into the woman and knocked off her cap, her beauty also became exposed for all to see. Meanwhile, after receiving a fierce glare from Shuang Wugue, also known as Unyielding Ice, Aqua Rose awkwardly released her hands and dared not fool around anymore. After seeing the anger in her friend's eyes, she knew that should she go any further, she would end up becoming a panda, just like she did in the past. After all, her friend was not one to show mercy to even beautiful women. Meanwhile, Unyielding Ice started scrutinizing Aqua Rose. When she failed to find any of the distress she had previously seen on her friend's face, she said in surprise, "It seems that glimmer chestplate design you mentioned through the phone has earned you a lot of money. Your complexion looks much better than before." "Yeah. Even I didn't expect the design to be so popular. I've already made 3,000 gold coins thus far. You can call me Miss Tycoon from now on," Aqua Rose gleefully said. "Neither the guild leader nor those elders know how much money I have right now. Once I reach level 10, I'll be able to swipe the lands and shops of NPC cities and make an even bigger killing." "How carefree you are, Miss Tycoon," Unyielding Ice said, rolling her eyes. Then, she lowered her voice and continued, "I just received some information stating that many of your guild's grand elders are voicing their opinions on how much credits and guild resources you've spent. They're just jealous," Aqua Rose said nonchalantly. "Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU also, now that you're doing so well, I'm guessing that brilliant war god won't be able to sit still for much longer. Eventually, he might even make use of his family's strength to harass you," Unyielding Ice said. While doing so, she also sent a glance at a robust young man, who was sneaking glances at Aqua Rose. This youth was none other than Brilliant War God. If he decides to take action, he'll probably strike at your relationship with Black Flame. After all, Black Flame is an independent player without any backing. "He indeed will take action," Aqua Rose said, nodding. However, she quickly smiled and added, "But if he tries to go against that person, he'll probably be humiliating himself." Unyielding Ice couldn't help but be a little surprised by Aqua Rose's words. She didn't think that her friend would be so confident in the person known as Black Flame. This aroused her interest in Black Flame, and she couldn't help but wonder what kind of person he was. However, it didn't take long for Unyielding Ice to know more about Black Flame. On the second day after the class reunion ended, she received shocking news from her informant in Twilight Echo. Brilliant War God had fallen from level 9 to level 0. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.